surrounding the Kalealoha, Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, September 8th, 2025, and thank you for joining. I'm Mayor Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to begin, as I always do, by introducing the other elected members of our council here today. I'll start on my far right with Councillor Alex Jurgensen. To his left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. Her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. To my far left is Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Kim Wake. And to his right is Councillor Allison Morse. We're also joined by several members of our professional staff here this afternoon, who include our Chief Administrative Officer, Kieran Dillon, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, as well as other members of our staff who may be presenting reports here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded and members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting. Your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as live streaming right now on our YouTube channel to the masses, where in posterity, as long as Google survives, I guess. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all passionate about what happens here. We encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct questions during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting to myself. For those that are following along, either in the gallery or online, the full council agenda package is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, which includes all of the staff reports that I might say we discussed here today. And with that, we'll flip over to my agenda and look to our corporate officer for the addition of any late items here this afternoon.
There are no late items.
No late items, and with that, I'll look to the council for a motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Councillor Jurgensen, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussions, changes, or amendments? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to our corporate officer for comments here today.
We have two signed up. Afternoon.
Okay, two public comments today. For those that are new to public comments, you will have 3 minutes to appear before council and make your comment to council. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So a couple things, if you haven't been here before. Your time doesn't start until you start speaking. So feel free to come up, take a breath, get settled. For I know for folks that are appearing before council for the first time, it can be a little anxiety provoking. Then at 2 minutes and 45 seconds, you'll hear a buzzer or a beep go off, and that's you're not going to get cut off. That's just a reminder to wrap up your comments, make your last pitch to council. Before we move on. With that, I will look to our corporate officer to call up our first commenter here today.
So our first commenter is actually Frank Ferrier, who has asked Margaret Underhill to be a letter on her behalf.
Thank you. Your name is Underhill.
Thank you. So Anne's letter is some further comments on Rosemary and Bob's presentation, which we've already looked at on the agenda. Your worship, ladies and gentlemen of the council, my husband Andre and I have been and still are volunteer climate observers for Environment and Climate Change Canada since 1992. I actively collected and mapped all the deep wells as well as the shallow wells of the island. That was in 1992 when I was a member of the now defunct Bowen Island Forest and Water Management Society. For me, it was a very exciting and exhilarating time as Marie Journet was using that data to create Bowen Island GIS map, a very new and very efficient way of presenting mapped information. I consider that I have an informed opinion regarding water matters on Bowen Island, and so I support wholeheartedly Rosemary Knight and Bob Turner's presentation, as well as their recommendations. In order to emphasize the importance of protecting fresh and groundwater supplies, I quote from their email dated August 19th, 2025. We need an island freshwater strategy that assesses, monitors, and proactively protects supply, brackets quantity and quality brackets, of water to streams, wetlands, lakes, and groundwater. I sincerely hope that this council will take the matter of supply of water for Bowen Island very seriously. Sincerely yours, and Frank de Ferrier Cholat. I'm number 2 as well. I refuse to leave. And this letter is from Brian and myself regarding the Lot 7 updated planners report. We have 2 concerns arising from the updated planners report. References throughout this report and the William Schulber report relate to the building of 4 residences. Presumably, each of these 4 residences could have a secondary suite, which could result in a total of 8 residences. How will this affect the water and septic issues on lot 7? While we appreciate that the applicant has suggested an increase from 75% to 83% of the area of lot 7 that would be protected by a conservation covenant, this also raises the ongoing issues of monitoring and enforcement, or lack thereof, of restrictive covenants. Historically, Bowen Island Municipality has not had the resources to monitor restrictive covenants and relies on a complaint-driven system of enforcement. Unfortunately, this means that very little monitoring or enforcement is actually achieved. In the case of lot 7, with a very large area of the proposed covenant area situated well away from public roads or public property, how will the conservation covenant be adequately monitored and enforced? Thank you to Bob Turner and Rosemary Knight for their informative presentation. We agree with them that land use planning needs to fully consider the protection of water supply for all Bowen Islanders in a comprehensive way, and that this protection should begin as soon as possible. Thank you.
Help?
I noticed that Designer Hill read from a prepared document. Could that be turned in?
I gave it to Sophia.
Okay, thank you.
And the public comments being concluded, we'll move on to delegations. At 3.1, we have Jacob Publicover, Campbell Isle regarding the permissive tax exemption. Mr. Publicover, feel free to join us up here.
Can I ask Vanessa Ramirez Hasso to join me as well? She's my coworker and also helps, or she runs the house.
Do whatever you like with those 2 chairs.
Great.
I mean, within reason.
Great. Good reason.
Yeah, but there's prayer.
Did everyone have a chance to read through the document, or would it be helpful for me to overview that? Okay. Overview, great. Essentially, what we're trying to do is continue running our outdoor center programs while keeping our nonprofit CRA status. So in order to do that, we need to run these programs through a separate entity, which would be a new created nonprofit organization that would then rent the property and facility from the BC Camping and Recreation Guild, Campbell Isle, and conduct the programs. The 5 lots would continue to be owned, controlled by the BC Camping and Recreational Guild. Much of that land is set aside just for conservation and public use with trails, etc. And the BC Camping and Recreational Guild and Campbell Isle would continue to operate as a year-round charity, carrying out its charitable purposes. And the new not-for-profit role would just be to rent the property during that approximately 35 days a year that we have outdoor center programs running. And those programs, of course, are for mainly school groups. So we run programs for VIPS, for IPS, IDLC. We also run programs for a leadership group in Squamish known as Healthy Hearts, Healthy Minds. And then there's also various other school groups or groups coming in to rent the property for use or for programs. So our main goal is to just ensure that this move would not affect our permissive tax exemption. We rely on that in order to operate. And unfortunately, if that's not the case, then we likely would have to stop running our outdoor center programs, and we would be restricted to running religious programs only, as is the focus of our summer programming at the moment. So
if I intuit the question.
yes, the question is, if we move to create this new nonprofit that will then, rent a facility and be able to provide these programs, will that or could that affect our permissive tax exemption?
I see some hands going up, so let's do a round of questions and we can sort of tie the process and the next question there. Starting with Councillor Jorgensen, Councillor Morrison Q. Is there any other councillors that wanted to get in the speaking? Or not speaking? Okay, Councillor Jorgensen.
Right through the chair.
if I understand correctly, the new nonprofit the current nonprofit is charitable status through CRA, correct?
Correct.
And the reason that the outdoor center programming cannot be run through that is it's considered ancillary to the charitable purposes to an extent that CRA would like that separated into another entity, is that correct?
That's correct.
And with that understanding, is the new nonprofit being created a subsidiary of the charity, or is it a distinctly separate entity?
It's a distinctly separate entity, but the BC Camping and Recreation Guild will have control over it, essentially.
Yes, like the governing board of the outdoor center
Mhm.
will have Camp Wild representation.
Okay, so it'd be, I see, but it would not be the sole controlling entity of the nonprofit. There would be other board directors as well.
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I think these are very technical questions and we'd have to look at the local government or the community charter and the permission tax exemption sections. And that we should refer the presentation and questions.
Maybe I'll look to our CFO right now as a, and maybe been conversation so far, and whether she'd like to lead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. There's nothing that immediately looking at the change in administrative structure that flags anything problematic for me, that the organization would continue to be eligible for permissive tax exemptions. For a little bit of historical context, part of the reason for the granting of the permissive tax exemption was twofold. First of all, to provide access to local youth and community groups to outdoor programming. Providing that the organization is committed to ensuring continuation of that access, that would further the objectives of council in granting that permissive tax exemption. And secondly was the preservation of green space and its natural habitat. So in the event there were plans to develop some of the properties or something like that, that would definitely pose some risk to the ongoing permissive tax exemption. That being said, permissive tax exemptions are granted at the pleasure of council, so there's never going to be any ongoing guarantee that that situation will continue to happen at 100% or some. There are other municipalities that grant smaller exemptions, 25, 50, 75%. This organization receives 100%, save for a small adjustment for the residential component of the land, but essentially it's 100% permissive tax exemption, and that situation is obviously we can't guess or confirm what this council or any future council would want to do. But at this point, the way it is with the change in administrative structure, there are provisions in the act which would accommodate that change.
Thank you. And I saw Councilor Jurgensen with your hand up for a follow-up.
Just follow up that through the chair. Just to confirm my own understanding, it would be really no different than if this nonprofit was an arm's length organization, just how IPS, VIX and so forth currently rent the space for the outdoor programming, that it's no different than having one organization come in and rent the space from Camp Bow Isle and then sublet it to IPS, VIX and so forth. So it doesn't really increase or decrease the amount of availability or money. Again, it just adds one layer of administration, correct?
That's correct. And in this case, it would preserve the availability.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any further questions or comments from council or staff. So as the CFO pointed out, these permissive tax exemptions come before us as part of the budget process. As you may or may not be aware, and my understanding, if I'm correct, it's for the property owner itself, is it? Yeah, okay. So I would anticipate that we'll see this come up as a part of our budget process. I do thank you for being here today. Camp Bow Isle is a treasured facility on Bowen Island. I know many of people that have kids in the room or folks in the community that have kids have certainly participated in programs there at some point in their life. So thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll see this come up again during our budget process.
When is the budget process? Just curious.
I will, yes, our CFO, it's the most exciting time of the year, which
The permissive tax exemption is done outside of the full budget process. The bylaw needs to be adopted by council before October 31st. So the bylaw will be coming for first reading from the council meeting in October, and the fourth reading and adoption before October 31st, the second meeting in October.
so I would pay attention to those dates and the council minutes for those dates. And you'll see more information then.
Thank you. Is there any appetite from council right now to give us indication of, because we are trying to move forward with making these moves in order to have things set up for our spring after center programs, and we have put a pause on booking new after center bookings until we've solidified this change.
How would I frame this? So the wheels of government grind slowly.
Right, yes, understood, yes.
Is one way to put it. But the other piece of it is that it would be, there's a fairness component in looking at all of the other organizations that are applying for permissive tax exemptions as well. So to grant one at this point, ahead of the process when we see them all in context, isn't something that we can do. So, you know, even if we were to say that we approve it in principle, there's still a fairness component there, and it really doesn't shake out until we even see that that bylaw come forward in October. Customers.
Maybe the CFO could correct me if my memory. The permissive tax exemptions, I thought we had granted for a certain number of years.
They were, so it was approved till the end of this term of council. As long as to date, there's no change in the ownership structure, I wouldn't be required to amend it. If there is a change in the ownership structure as of that date of the bylaw draft, I may have to amend it to reference a different section of the community charter under which council may provide the permissive tax exemption.
Okay.
So at this point, if I'm understanding, the exemption stands unless the CFO, in looking at your proposal, finds out that somehow it either doesn't fit or it's amended, and so I guess that's why I was suggesting we refer it to the CFO.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And the operations looks substantially the same.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, thank you, Mayor and councilors.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have Bob Turner and Rosemary Knight regarding the official community plan.
You're sharing the time.
You know, the clock doesn't start moving until I start talking.
Sorry.
So,
As long as you're not playing Sudoku.
okay, Mayor and Council, wonderful to be here. Rosemary and I wrote you a letter, and it intended to sort of shine a light on the need for a water protection strategy and a nature protection strategy in the OCP. And we intend to speak to the OCP steering committee regarding that. But we thought we should talk to you because there are development proposals going forward that would benefit from a comprehensive water strategy in place. We don't have it, but we want to speak to sort of elements of it and really here lay sort of some basis of understanding for why it's important. So traditionally, Public Works has been responsible for water supply on the island, and they focused on human use. Unfortunately, that really doesn't take into account the whole supply side, which nature provides, nor the nature's needs. And where we are shifting to now, and I'm happy to see it sort of later in the agenda, is sort of land use planning really coming in and taking on sort of the issues of nature supply, both stream flow and groundwater, as well as we need to consider nature's needs in that equation. And so that's really our first point. The second point is groundwater and surface water are intimately linked together as a single water supply system. And so we'd like to use the Grafton Lake watershed as an example of that. And the watershed is that area that drains into Grafton Lake. So anything that happens in the watershed influences potentially water quality and water quantity in the lake. And the lake being, of course, Bowen's primary water supply. So this is a simple cartoon that tries to illustrate some elements. If you were to drive across the watershed and the roads are drawn in red, you'd enter the watershed at the Grafton Lake water at the dam. You're heading west now. And you would pass Harding Road, Buchanan Road, turn off to Sunset Road, and you would exit the watershed just short of the Bowen Bay Road turnoff. If you were to turn left and head up over Sunset Road, you would exit the watershed pretty much at Josephine Lake, which is just outside the watershed. Now, lots going on in the watershed. Unlike Vancouver, where it doesn't even permit people to enter the watershed, we've got lots going on. We have the new Lakelands development, we've got the building center, we've got the Buchanan Road pit, we've got the Ruddy Kitchen, and we've got lots of residential landowners in the watershed. So it's a busy place. Within that watershed, nature is at work. And nature is essentially supplying water by picking up the water that flows off Mount Gardner, off Apodaca Mountain, that feeds into sort of the main stem stream, which is Bowen Brook, and flows into Grafton Lake. And so if you go to the head of Bowen Brook up at Quarry Park and Headwaters Park, those two pond wetland complexes feed Bowen Brook. It drains through the Lot 7 wetland and then works its way down to Grafton Lake, collecting sort of tributary supply. That's the green infrastructure that we need to treat as absolutely a core value of Bowen Island. This is a non-negotiable. We have to protect that water supply. It is so vital to nature's needs, to human needs. That said, there's more to the story than that. Under the valley is a whole aquifer system of sands, gravels, and clays that essentially fill in the valley floor and is a groundwater pathway where water recharges from the surface at the headlands, often in wetlands. This diagram, I should say, is a cross-section that goes from the Grafton Lake up to the Bowen Bay Road. And so you're looking at sort of a line right down the middle of the valley. Water recharges into the sands and gravels. It flows downhill, and springs enter into Grafton Lake. And through the summer, when the water levels at Grafton Lake only fall so much, Bowen Brook is just a measly little stream, and Cove Bay continues to draw significant water out of the lake. The reason the lake levels don't fall further are those the springs that the groundwater feeds to the lake. So it's an important part of the water supply story. The good news on the groundwater front, as you know, is that the Islands Trust has provided, through a contract to a consultant, groundwater recharge potential mapping for a number of Gulf Islands. Bowen is one of them. And so we now have this map. And recharge matters for two important reasons. One is it's all about the ability of surface waters to supply the groundwater system with quantity. The second very important thing about recharge is that it is also a pathway for contaminants on the surface into the groundwater system. And so it is, in a sense, an aquifer vulnerability map. That's what you're looking at. So let's just zoom in on one particular area which is the junction of Adams Road, Sunset Road, Owen Bay Road, and West Side Road. And on that map, there is a high and very high area of recharge identified. And you can see Bowen Brook is the blue line that sort of flows from the bottom of the page up to that area and then takes a hard right and heads down valley toward Grafton Lake. And the important point is that there are two rezoning applications currently that are both in this area. And the point to be made here is that we need to be taking a holistic view, which I appreciate the planners are now doing, on these rezoning applications and any rezoning applications on the island, and utilizing this sort of new tool to understand or deduce sort of what the impacts on groundwater recharge may be. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rosemary.
Great. And with this simple schematic, I just want to further emphasize the importance of groundwater recharge. This is showing a simple schematic of what it looks like below the surface in these locations where we have optimal recharge. Geologic characteristics, we have interconnected pathways of sands and gravels, and we've come to refer to these in my group as fast paths. So we are looking for these fast paths that fast track any water on the ground surface in a wetland or from a stream down into the underlying aquifer. The important thing about these fast paths, as Bob mentioned, is not only do they fast track water, they fast track contaminants. So maps of recharge, where there's optimal connection between the surface and near surface and the groundwater system, also serve as maps of aquifer vulnerability. Anything going on in these recharge areas can quickly impact water quality in the underlying groundwater and in any connected stream, lake. My last two slides is something I'm passionate about. I love the line, you can't manage what you can't measure. And it's thinking about the bigger picture of how do we get our head around proactively managing and protecting our freshwater supply on this island. And this shows the complex system that our freshwater system is. We've got fluxes, which are the arrows in lowercase. We have precipitation, we have stream flow, we have evapotranspiration, we have recharge, and we have places where we store water, in lakes, in groundwater, and canopy moisture. We store water in our vegetation. So how can we think about managing this system? What measurements could we be making? Well, you could be measuring lots of different things. I just circled here what to me seem some of the obvious things we could be doing more of on this island. Monitoring stream flow, monitoring lake levels. Let's get all the groundwater well owners across the island, citizen science. Let's get monitoring systems in wells to monitor groundwater levels. And something that's got a question mark, because this schematic here captures things that are state of the practice, like stream gauges, to state of the research, which is the canopy moisture. And it's new satellite data that give you information about how our trees are drying out as we deplete our groundwater system, as we deplete our stream flow. It's not just Cove Bay that's running out of water, it's our trees. And as canopy moisture starts to plummet, fire risk goes up. So it's a complex interconnected system that we need to be measuring to manage. Key thoughts, we need a comprehensive water protection strategy starting now. Surface water, groundwater, single system. Assess, monitor, protect. Whereas island water security in the past has been the domain of public works, it now requires proactive land use planning. I like to talk about zoning for recharge. And the last point, land use planning, protection of water supplies, needs to start now. Sit.
Thank you. So starting with Councilor Saunders, followed by Councilor Morris.
Thanks for that. It was pretty informative. Just one quick question for me is the developer of those two lots, are they aware of the findings of this study, and in particular the finding with the high recharge right at the Adams Sunset intersection there? And if they are, have they responded in any way, recommended to you in any way about it?
It's in.
Yeah, I mean, the lot 7 application is later in the agenda.
Right.
And what I presented earlier, back in June or so, and the recommendation that came out of that was to sort of engage with the Islands Trust Freshwater Specialist, which the planner's done, which is terrific. And so there's a whole sort of new sort of information base to sort of think about the problem.
Okay.
So the answer, is yes. The one thing I would caution though, is that what the planner focused on and the freshwater specialist responded to was recharge.
Water quantity.
Quantity. The separate issue of water quality and the potential for aquifer contamination in these high recharge sites wasn't addressed, and it becomes very important when you're dealing with septic fields.
Thank you.
Councilor.
Can I ask, perhaps you can go back to the map with all the colors, blues and purples?
Yes.
But we don't have that particular one, but it had Rolling Brook running through it on that. No, there was another one that had Rolling Brook. There, that one.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding the map correctly, the purple and the black are the critical areas.
Yes.
So are you suggesting that there should not be any construction of any kind in those purple and black areas?
No, I think it's a consideration. I think there needs to be an evaluation to the best of our ability with the best technical support possible to evaluate the risks of both of those. And I think for example, lot 7 is currently being sort of worked on. What's being done on lot 7 was sort of a discussion with the freshwater specialist regarding water quantity, what sort of impacts. And it sounded like he felt they were not significant. The issue that wasn't addressed, though, as I mentioned, was the potential for aquifer contamination in these high recharge sites. That's a separate issue and it relates to water quality. And as we know, there has been recent testing of Grafton Lake, and there definitely is some type of septic contaminant getting into the lake water at low levels. So the question is how? Is it, from septic going down into the groundwater system? Is it septic going overland and into streams? Is it septic going down into groundwater and then coming back to streams and flowing into the lake? There are multiple pathways that it's possible. But the bottom line is we need to really be thinking hard about this and guarding against, the highest risks.
And I think it's science-based decision making. Like go into this, knowing what we know and understand about the recharge, and then over to you. There is a risk analysis.
Other questions from council? Councilor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering sort of next steps here and in terms of resources that we might have to do all this examination. I know we've already had some help from the Islands Trust, significant reporting, and there are, there are experts in this field, but I'm presuming it's going to be a pretty expensive process, and I just wonder if you're aware of any grants that might be available, or basically some resources should we decide we want to go ahead with this.
Well, I'm happy to answer that because that's what I've spent a lot of my time doing, is getting funding to do cool new things related to fresh water. And I've been in touch with a group in UVic, like in 2015, the province passed the Water Act, which basically says we need to be sustainably managing our fresh water. It has not been enacted to the extent that was envisioned when it was passed. And so there has been some federal funding allocated to look at the whole water situation. Very little so far allocated to proactively manage. But I just think very soon, I think we need to collectively get our act together, come up with a plan. What could we do? 3 years ago, I called a group in California that could sensors in wells to measure water level. And if I could find 40 people, it was going to be $700 US per well. And I found 20 people like that who were willing to pay for it themselves. So I think you have people on this island really committed to being part of the solution. And I can imagine stream gauges deployed. I think there's tremendous potential to tap into human resources without a large need for financial resources.
Council Wade, over to our CEO.
I think you're looking just to put a finer touch on that, with the resources that are out there. So the province actually has a mandate. They operate the IMAP BC aquifer mapping. They will go do these wells. They're part of their funding is that they place wells in different areas. And I don't know to what degree they've done it on Bowen Island, but that is a request that we can make to the provinces that have maybe Bowen Island prioritized in that aquifer mapping that they do, because they do have some resources. But the most expensive part of all these, and just so that the speakers are aware, I do have a background in hydrogeology from a past life here, and studied under the great Dr. Cherry in Waterloo. So I know a little bit about this, and so the most expensive part is the well drilling. If you want to have a comprehensive network of data loggers, one well alone can, depending on how deep it goes, it could be $50,000, right? So that is the big thing on a robust program. But there is some supports available from the province because they do have this mandate to map all the applicants.
If I could just respond briefly to that. That's for a dedicated monitoring well, which would be like the gold standard. But I do think with technology now deploying them in pumping wells, operational wells, we can get a lot of okay data. And the province has 2 wells, is my understanding, out at CRC now. And I think there's one there. There's a few provincially monitored.
If I could add to that too, Bowen's a big place. There's a lot of sort of complicated aquifers on the island that are fractured bedrock ones that are really, I think, hard to model and figure out, what's going on over a large area. I think the Grafton Lake watershed offers an opportunity because it's the biggest place where we've got a simple sediment aquifer, and perhaps focusing on that because of the importance of that water supply in characterizing that particular sand and gravel aquifer, would be a really important first step that would sort of scope the problem down a bit. And if there were observation wells that the province already had in that network, that would be great. As Rosemary said, maybe we could get some people living in the valley to sort of be data loggers themselves and start to build something. And then on top of that, look for funding to maybe get a geologist or hydrologist to come in and maybe do a mapping of that aquifer and look at all the well data and try and pull it together. And maybe that would be, a small contract.
See Councillor Fausto, University.
Thanks for this presentation. That's great to bring together some of the new info with the perspective of all the work that you've done over the years and your research perspective. I think that's really helpful. I know the province has, under the New Water Act, they've got the ability to set up a freshwater strategy for a municipality. And it occurs to me that Bowen might be a really good one for that because we've got this saltwater moat around us. Like it could provide a clearer picture as to how the province might use that kind of strategy. Anyway, as a pilot test plot, if you will, and then defining it this way into just the Grafton Lake watershed would be even better. I think we've got 2 observation wells, I think, currently, and both of them are up on their old wells that were not being used anymore, just adopted recently, so we don't have a lot of data from them. But I think I've been involved in a couple of projects over the years where people have been measuring. There's interest, and now there's new technology. There might be a better way to capture it rather than pencils in the rain, So anyway, thank you very much for bringing this. I've got some more things to talk about later in the agenda, but I think it's really helpful to come forward at the beginning of September of this time of planning leading up to the OCP, that we should get ahead of it. Thank you. Not a question.
Yes.
Your worship, just one quick point, because it is very germane to this topic, is that the first cut of the RFP for the watershed management plan is being reviewed by staff, and we anticipate that RFP will be posted in the next month. One of the items in the preliminary draft, as I read it, is to ensure the protection and sustainable management of the island's most important drinking water source and allow this source to serve an expanded area and accommodate future development. So it's, and also looking at the long-term water supply as part of that plan. So the RFP will be circulated so that once that RFP is done, we'll have a consultant on it and it should bring some more data to light and bring some additional things that could possibly form the basis of future policy.
Just checking, question for the CAO, can the materials in this council agenda, not only the delegation, but the materials down in the lot 7 discussion, which include the materials from Islands Trust, can those be referred to in the RFP? So the consultants know that all that data is available? They can make it.
Yes,
proper quote?
through the chair, any data that's out there is being referenced in the RFP. So we've referenced documents such as the Islands Trust Area Aquifer conceptualization. So that is mentioned in the RFP as the one potential source of information.
Could I just make a quick comment, tying back to what we were saying, nature for humans, nature for nature, water for humans, water for nature. Grafton Lake is not only a drinking water supply, it's essential to biodiversity. Yeah, I think I'd like to see that in a minute.
So some questions that I've got. How do I want to frame this? I'm curious about the nuts and bolts and sort of the how the water protection strategy and what that looks like as a decision maker. And I'll speak from my seat, having been in the seat for a few years now. We hear, when it comes to development on the island, we hear a lot about water. There's a lot of claims made about water, and I think traditionally that's related to water quantity, as you put it. And I think the report that we got from the Rainforest Foundation that Peter Ross did, spoke to most of the quality issues as well on Bowen, which to me seems to indicate that there's issues in our watershed that need to be resolved. And if they don't get resolved through either land use planning or policy, or the work that we're doing, particularly in the watershed stretches from Grafton all the way to Bowen Bay Road. If we don't do that soon, we're still, we're going to develop all of those areas. And not to say that they shouldn't be developed, but it's like, how are we doing that development? How are we doing it sustainably? And how are we catering for water? What I find difficult as a decision maker, particularly of the community, is that there's lots of claims made about water. About we don't have enough, we do have enough, the quality's bad, the quality's good. But it's like, I actually haven't seen the data one way or the other. And the first tranche of that, like actual hard data that we got, has been this mapping through the Islands Trust, through the work that Peter Ross and his organization did. And so my question is, like, as a decision-making body here on the island, what would the exercise be? So let's say in the next 5 minutes, we passed a motion that said, let's pursue a water protection strategy for Bowen Island. We've heard a little bit about the data and getting well data monitored either through citizen science or our observation wells. But like, what would be the other components of that you folks would be looking for the island to implement as part of a protection strategy? Like, what would the tangible aspects of that being, given your background, Mr. Turner, in policy and Rosemary with your academic knowledge, like what would you actually look to see the municipality do and implement as part of the water protection strategy?
It's a great question and sort of like the next steps question. And I think what the CAO pointed to is a great first step, like bringing in some type of expertise to sort of take a big view picture. And I do think it's personally worth it scoping down sort of the enterprise so that you learn by doing in an area which is really important. So you're getting bang for buck and has probably a reasonable density of data that's going to integrate back together so that you can get a holistic view of what's going on. And I think that sort of the Grafton Lake watershed is sort of the ideal candidate for that. And so I think if that's pursued, you know, you're starting to build the building blocks of someone looking at the landscape, pulling the data together that's available, identifying the data gaps, which is huge. You know, what's not being done right now that could be done, and much of that might, as Rosemary mentioned, could be measurement. Like, what are we not measuring that we need to start measuring right now to build sort of the understanding of it and build up from that sort of solid framework. And I think that would be, you know, a big and very important and pivot point for the island to sort of take on that type of serious work. Once you get that going, then like people can start feeding into the process. Like maybe the Conservancy can do something, because right now we're putting together basically an environmental library for the island. Maybe we can start to pull together some data that would complement that process if we knew why we were doing it. You know, we had a purpose, we knew what we could sort of feed into. As Rosemary said, maybe, you know, you could say, gosh, if we had well monitors in these 4 places and in the watershed, that would be huge in terms of determining sort of what sort of changes we're seeing over the seasons through multiple seasons in sort of water tables. I mean, I think that's where you start to build a kernel, and then people can sort of add on, or you get additional fundraisings for this or that.
And I think in terms of the water quality, we really need to be out there at the edge of the science right now, so that Peter did a fantastic job, but you're taking water samples. We need in situ capacity sensors that are monitoring for the key contaminants, you know, like they put around contaminated sites. We should be putting those sorts of sensors and monitoring schemes around septic fields. We should know when septic fields are failing, not wait until we have evidence of failed septic fields in Grafton Lake. So thinking strategically somehow about how to put in place the monitoring schemes we need to continually monitoring potential threats to water quality. We don't want to monitor every single septic field on the island. I don't know, Peter, what would you monitor? But we have to start monitoring something.
Right.
And even on the monitoring front, I'm not sure right now that lake levels in Grafton like the monitor.
Yeah.
And if they're not, we need to, because if you measure the water flowing out of the creek and you measure the lake level and you know what Cove Bay is drawing out of it and you guess what evaporation is doing, you can figure out how much water is coming into the lake. That's your feed. That's what we need to know. It's like, what's our supply that we're dealing with? And so, but you need some measuring ongoing over time to sort of start to accomplish those understandings.
We could fly a drone with a thermal sensor in the winter and you pick up the warm water coming from groundwater. Seriously.
So the other question that I have is, so what I'm hearing is there's a monitoring component that needs to drive evidence-based decisions moving forward in the future, providing planning community development of time. The other prong of it, given that municipality is always busy, and if we've spoken to a couple of the rezoning applications that are before us that look like they are in critical recharge sites on the island in the watershed, is what would a freshwater protection strategy look like for current developments that are working their way through the municipality? So, you know, in terms of policy or what the municipality should be asking for or what council should be looking at. Because I find that there's a very explicit tension in the community between conservation and development. Right. And I think it gets polarized in either, you know, we should do no development or we should do exclusively conservation. And it's difficult to find the middle ground. But often I hear from the very same people on different weeks, like, you got to keep going as it is, you can't have any more development, and you need to solve the affordable housing crisis. We need, we need more affordable housing on the island. So there's a tension there that I think can be solved through a sustainability lens. But in terms of like the applications that are going through or the building of diverse housing on the island, like, you know, what's the recommendation for the existing developments that are moving through this process in the watershed?
So my preference is a do no harm policy.
Okay.
That the burden of proof is on the proponent. that this will do no harm. You know, I don't think you can go to the other extreme and say, you need to prove to me that this is going to cause deterioration of water quality and ground. Anyways, that's me. I want to, do you agree? Yeah, so do no harm. And the burden of proof is on the proponent. I think we've gone along for too long, just ignoring where we are in terms of freshwater security and freshwater protection. And assuming, oh, if someone can prove potable water, go for it. Not good enough. It's like the impact. We don't even ask people to prove whether they're drilling a well here is going to impact water supply over here. We don't ask people to prove how their groundwater capture is impacting stream flows. We don't, you know, we are so far from asking people to prove that they are not harming everything else with their freshwater.
Thank you.
Do no harm.
Over to Garcia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just, so I mean, the gold standard for this would be a source water protection plan. Some of that work might be embedded within this draft watershed management plan we're doing. Might have to do secondary corollary to that source water protection plan, but there's monitoring, there's also a policy piece of it. And so it's not that development can't occur, it's just it might have to have certain constraints on it. You know, you can't have an underground buried fuel tank within the recharge zone. You can have a certain type of septic field within that. So that's all stuff that would come out of the detailed planning and assessment that happens with the source water protection plan. And then on the other part, in terms of Grafton Lake water monitoring, a degree of that does happen because we are, through our water license, required to have a certain amount of environmental flow needs for the downstream Terminal Creek. That's not only for the salmon, but also for water users that draw directly from the creek. So we do have a system of managing it. It's kind of a lot of it's up in the heads of our public works staff. I would rather have it more documented, and ultimately, if we can have a system where it's handled by SCADA and it's automated, I think that would give us more flexibility. But we do monitor that, and we do try and stay on top of that. And that's one of the reasons we went to stage 3 water restrictions a lot earlier this year, because we have to be getting people prepared for what climate change is going to mean for us. So we made that change in that. There was no pushback from the community. I think they understood. So we are doing things on that front. So it's all those things.
Councillor Fast is the
Just a quick
last.
question. I'm interested in the canopy moisture vegetation side of it.
That
You
is
mentioned
so
it as a
cool.
research. Can you send me some references, please?
Yes.
And also, and especially if there's any links to wildfire risk. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I actually have a colleague at University of Texas, Austin, who was going back over the last 15 years trying to extract from satellite data the changing water levels in Grafton Lake. So it's amazing what you can do now with satellite data in terms of monitoring.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Really appreciate the work that you've done and the care that you put into it. You know, I think in yourself, Professor Knight, coming to council and
By a very different hat.
our former mayor and just giving your knowledge and expertise on the island and the pressing issue of fresh water. You know, really appreciate you taking the time.
And thank you for all you do. You know, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks. When to be here.
This is a very cool community. You know, it's lovely.
Okay, and with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. I'll look to councilors for any items that you would like to pull from me. Councilor Daly.
4.8. 12.5. 12.8 and 12.9.
Councilor Morse.
12.7.
12.13.
Oh, 12.1.
12.14.
Yeah.
Okay, not seeing any further items from council for both in the consent agenda, I will look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councilor Jurgensen, seconded by Councilor Getty. All in favor, raise your hand, and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. So first up at 4.3 is Robert McGilvery regarding housing options on Bowen Island dated October 18th. Over to you, Councilor Getty.
Right, so, Mr. Avery is recommending that, the official community plan steering committee have a look at this, housing option that, is suggested. So we've just had this, recent agreement with Parch, and I'm wondering if it should also, be referred to them for information.
So I take that as a motion to refer to the steering committee
Add
and
to
to
the-
Birch.
Recommendation to, let her go to the OCPSC plus.
So motion to refer, seconded by Councilor Wake. Any further discussion? On the question, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously, and that is referred. Moving on to 4.8, notice of motion. Over to you, Councilor Getty. However, just to point out by procedure by law, the motion is noticed and then is taken up at the next regular meeting of council.
All right, so this is on today's agenda for a notification. And it's coming back for more detailed discussion in October. But I'm wondering, because we're going to UBCM and we've got potentially an option of meeting with some people from transportation, that we take this motion into consideration as any part of, if we do manage to get a delegation to the Minister of Staff. Because all the content in this is part and parcel of the kinds of discussions we want to have with people about transportation.
I will say that on the flip side, there may be some political strategy in talking about this when we come back from UBCM. And because we'll have our political meeting with the very dependent communities on that Sunday. We'll see what comes out of there. At UBCM, on the agenda, it also looks like the CEO of BC Ferries is leading a workshop or forum on restructuring. We'll get whatever we get out of ministry staff. So we might want to make changes to this motion based on what comes out of UBCM.
But just what I want to make sure is that everybody reads this fairly carefully, keeps it in mind in terms of all of the process that we're going through at UBCM with respect to transportation. So it's just to highlight the contents.
For now, it's just a notice, so it hasn't even been seconded, so it'll come back at September 8th as a proper, or in our October meeting as a proper motion. That's best.
Does this mean we need to adopt it as part of the consent agenda? So, no. Okay, just checking.
That we don't, I pulled it out of consent, so now I want it to go back into consent. And I simply wanted to highlight that there's a big detailed content in here that we should, if we haven't read it carefully and with detail, that we should keep in mind in terms of meetings that are coming up.
Yeah, so it would just be a motion to receive this way.
Motion to receive item 4.8 notice of motion.
Moved by Councilor Fast, seconded by Councilor Saunders. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Aye. Aye, that carried unanimously. And then I believe we are at numerical order 12.5. If I skip down to our correspondence, South Bowen Action Committee regarding direction dated July 22nd. Back over to you, Councilor Gary.
So we're getting this letter, and I believe this is the second one that we've received, and I'm very curious. It's an interesting group and it's interesting comments, but I don't have any concept of who the people are that are involved. So I simply want to ask that either these people identify themselves or that staff ask them so that we know who's involved. So it's follow up.
I don't know who's involved either, except for one person. And I just want to stress, they are very different from the Southbound Community Association. They're not.
So it's not a sub.
No.
Okay. Yes, Council President.
I agree with this because I was confused, but also, partly because it's redacted in here, I don't know even who the writer is. And, I don't think we're supposed to accept anonymous, submissions. So I'm not sure what to do with it, except to, I move that we refer item, 12.5 back to staff for, information on authorship. Okay,
So that council directs staff to inquire as to the membership of Visa Affirmative Action.
thank you. I move that.
Is there a second? Seconded by Council Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. 12.6, Tom Edwards regarding community information meeting Eagle Cliff Cove Bay Connection Project dated July 28, 2025. Over to you, Council Getty.
Thank you. There were some comments in here with respect to the issue about, I guess it was referring to comments made by Glenn Cormier about whether or not the Cove system is up and running and whether or not the Eagle Cliff extension should be considered. So I'd like to have some clarification, a follow-up on this letter by staff with respect to both the Michigan federal funding and an update to the with people with respect to the functionality of the water treatment. So a measured response to this matter, whether it's not left with this letter not being replied to.
Over to you.
Your worship, we provided a pretty exhaustive and extensive information at the community session to residents. The information hasn't changed significantly from that. So, I mean, we can reiterate the same information that we shared at that community information that we had almost 50 people in attendance. So we can summarize that in minutes if we haven't already done so, send it out. But there isn't anything significantly that's changed. We had a legal opinion on our borrowing, and we haven't received any information since.
Council Getty for follow-up.
Perhaps if we can publish a response indicating that this is a Zoom meeting and indicating that there's no change in information and that people should be referring to that in response to this.
And I'm just wondering, so the last update that we have on the public facing Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant Project webpage is from July 14th. Is that update still current or should there be another update made to that page?
Yes, there should be a new update, and I suggest that we have a item to discuss this. And I'm hoping that in fall we will reconvene another mayor's task force structure with any staff that are on board.
So dispositions over to you, Councilor Getty, whether motion to receive, refer. Do something else.
Refer to staff for follow-up on this one.
Motion to refer to staff, it's been moved.
But I'm sorry, public facing, not students. Okay, not just to the person.
Yeah, just look to our corporate officer, have that's captured.
So I have that council direct staff to respond to Tom Edwards. And add their response to the next meeting.
Okay, yep. Thank you. So moved, seconded, any further discussion? Seeing I'll call the question, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Oh, this is fun. That iPad just died, so I lost the
Letters Recruiter.
letter recruiter 12.7 over to you. So we're gonna have to collaborate on the rest of this. The consent agenda. Over to you, Councilor Morse.
I don't want to get into any discussion about it. I will move that the letters be received, and I finished it. There was a recent article in the Undercurrent, which is not included in this package, that implied that if there was the money available, the Wildlife Foundation, Wildlife Foundation or Wildlife Society would Wildlife Safe BC would relocate the cougar. The only reason they had was, so what I would like to do is request staff to contact Wildlife BC. If I got the name right, Wild Safe BC, and ask if the writer of the Undercurrent article is correct. Because if she is, then there's going to be no issue about raising money to relocate cougar. So I would move that we request staff to contact Wild Safe BC to check on the correctness of the article.
Moved by Councilor Morse, seconded.
Nope.
Nope.
And partly, I think we want to stop the letters coming, and I think this is a good first step. So I would hope somebody would second it and you would pass it, because it's a very simple request.
Is there a seconder? I'll second it just as I have questions from staff that we can. Debate. So moved and seconded. I suppose my question to staff, either for the CAO or our manager of Parks and Environment, is do we know whether that's a correct statement that Wild Safe BC can or has the ability or authority to privately remove the cougar? Yep.
I'll refer that to our manager of Parks and Environment.
Are you able to join us just up here at the front for the sake of the microphones?
I would say. The chair, I have spoken with the conservation officers recently regarding whether the cougar could be relocated or whether it was more likely if the cougar would be dispatched or killed, as they say. They didn't have any certain answer for that question. So it's very rare that they would relocate a cougar. More often it is killed, but there is a possibility that it could be relocated. There was no discussion about whether or not private funds could be contributed towards that. But the conservation officer that I was discussing this with didn't have the authority to make those decisions. And he stated that they would come from higher up.
Are you familiar with Wild Safe BC or that organization?
I am familiar with them. They're an organization that provides education to the communities that they are stationed in. There's usually one representative for each community, and the community often contributes to that program. And their goal is to minimize conflicts between people and wildlife. Sorry, if I could just add to that too. Councillor Morse, I believe, I did read the article afterwards, and I believe that person was probably mistaken.
Well, I just want to kill that idea by checking with Wild Safe BC.
The last question I have is just a follow-up on something that you said in relation to the BC Conservation Officer of relocating versus putting down. What are the statistics from, or do you have a sense of the percentage of how many animals, cougar specifically, are put down versus relocated by the conservation officer?
I don't have a specific statistic. I will say that when we did the Q&A with the Wild Safe BC educator, she had looked into it for us, as this had been brought up a couple times within the community, and she said that it is very rare, and there were only very specific situations in which they would do that.
Put down or relocate?
Relocate, sorry.
Okay.
There was one relocation where a cougar ended up on an island where there was no deer at all whatsoever, just a few residences. And so in that situation, they relocated the cougar quite quickly in order to keep the community safe because there was no food for it. So that was a very rare situation. And she didn't know of any others where there were successful relocations. Part of the reason they don't do that is because it's very hard to have a successful relocation. Quite challenging to, there's no guarantee they can even trap the cougar, let alone find a suitable habitat for it once it was trapped and to relocate it to. You know, animals get habituated to the place that they're in, so it makes their lives quite a bit more difficult and quite a lot more energy intensive for them to move.
Right. And then just for clarity, because I think it bears repeating, what is the municipal authority to trap or put down a cougar?
Municipality does not have any jurisdiction over wildlife. It is solely a provincial responsibility to deal with wildlife, including cougars.
Including what?
Cougars.
Including cougars, okay. And then, so what's our role then, again, in with relation to the public and liabilities that relates to the cougar on the island?
So the municipality has been supporting the conservation officer services and making sure that their messages were received amongst the community. We're providing education. We did the Q&A and have been in contact with the conservation officer service fairly regularly in order to react to any given situations that were concerning and to get their advice on whether or not to close trails or warn the community. But mostly they've just been asking us to share the message that that everyone needs to educate themselves on what to do if they see a cougar and how to avoid a conflict with a cougar.
Thank you.
I read the letters that I'm on 7B and C.
Okay, so we actually do have a motion on the floor, which we can,
Or do we just leave it in the consent agenda?
we can just have it from.
Oh, we've got a motion on it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I would like to vote on.
Okay, so can we have the motion read out again? So
That council directs staff to contact Wildlife BC to inquire about checking the correctness of the underground.
moved and seconded, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. And so that carries unanimously. The only other comment that I'll make on this and that I was information that we've already put out, but I wanted the manager of Parks and Environment to explicitly state is that in the undercurrent and some of the letters we received from the community, it makes reference to this council and our staff being derelict in its public safety duty, which I think is disingenuous and entirely incorrect. So as you've heard from our staff and as you've heard from the municipality, we have been in regular contact with the BC Conservation Officer Service. We've passed on resident concerns, we've passed on resident complaints. It's a very active discussion in the community, but ultimately we do not have the legal authority to remove, trap, even feed and pet and cuddle. So one way or the other, we can only support the province in its jurisdiction. And complaining to the municipality about it is like complaining to Starbucks when you've got a problem with your Tim Hortons order. It's just the wrong level of government to complain to. And there are elected representatives of this community elected and sent to the provincial legislature and sent into ministries that can address those concerns and have direct authority to address those concerns. Our focus as a municipality is on all of the business that you see on this agenda and the intergovernmental dealing of wildlife just isn't in the purview of the municipality right now, and that statement's been made. By all means, reach out to our manager of Parks and Environment if you have a concern about the cougar or if there is dangerous behavior or there is information about the cougar that you would like to pass on. But as a municipality, you do not have the authority or the jurisdiction to take any action on that form of wildlife on the island. And as a, that public safety responsibility rests with the province exclusively and explicitly in legislation. And with that, we will move on. Who is next on?
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I also move that we receive the letters in 12.7?
Motion to, or just do that by unanimous consent. Any objections to receiving the letters in 12.7? Okay, that is carried through unanimous consent. 12.9, Dana Heilger, regarding further development in Blue Water, dated August 5th, 2025.
Fine, and there's mention in that we're in exactly the same position regarding water as we have been for the past 10 years, so I was surprised to read that, but I had heard about a pretty significant leak that was discovered after the water lines were installed. So we've done all this work and effort to upgrade the roads, but not the water.
Maybe I'll look to staff for a comment on that.
Through the chair, so I'm just trying to figure out the details of that, Councillor Getty, because the details.
Okay, so
of what was
12.9 is a letter from
concerns.
resident of Blue Water saying that request is that no further development be allowed in Blue Water until the water problem is resolved. This year, despite our new water lines, we're in exactly the same position with water as we have been for the past 10 years. Stage 4 water restrictions in the first week of August. It's not acceptable as a yearly occurrence, and clearly we've not solved the problem. It's obvious we do not have enough water to meet current needs. So the community has just spent a huge whack of money to have a big project, and I'm wondering if it's accurate or it should be.
So now, thank you for that. Now I can add the context to answer that. So, and I think it's important with all the correspondence that comes in is we have to understand the timing and the context of what was sent in. So that was after a period where we had two major leaks on private services that were not disclosed to the municipality. Once we were aware of them, we went in, we did the work, we fixed the leaks. The problems. The other thing is it was prior to the connection between King Edward Bay and our system happening. That work has since happened. So we've wrapped up our water works on the west side. We're transitioning over to Eagle Cliff. So all the circumstances around that complaint have since gone and the work has happened. But it was related to some major leaks, which I think further justifies why we did the work in that area. Is because there is all this infrastructure that is of various condition that we know of.
And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, still, the work was mostly focused on distribution as opposed to supply. Because they put great distribution.
Well, they're connected. They're connected.
And I'm curious, just through staff, maybe this is a question for the manager of planning. Is there still a moratorium on permits in Blue Water? Yes, there is. Okay, so there isn't any development happening in Blue Water currently, right, as it is. Okay. Over to you for disposition, Councilor.
We've received the letter.
Okay, so the moved, seconded, all in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
There's unanimously. Next up. Yep.
Through chair, this letter was one.
You state the item of it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pass it on my screen.
Oh, okay. It's regarding the filming on deck of Queen Capilano on September 2nd, using up the lane. This letter is one in a long line of issues of BC Ferries, of course, which everybody's pretty familiar with. I'm curious too, because this letter was also forwarded to BC Ferries. I saw, have we had any, or has the writer perhaps, if not, BAM had any response to that? And if not, I would like to see municipality follow up regarding the reasoning for the reasoning for that happening at the time it did, and then whatever notification they think they might have given us that nobody seems to have seen. So I guess the first question is, did BC Ferries respond in any way to anybody's knowledge here?
After the chair, there was no staff to staff correspondence or prior warning of that.
Yeah.
First we found out about it was we received Ms. Robertson's correspondence.
Then I'd like to move that we refer this to staff to contact BC Ferries and draw a response from them regarding their reasoning and their lack of notification to the community.
Councilor Saunders?
I'll second that, but I've got a sort of similar motion with 12.14.
Okay, let's get it on the floor and we'll play some resolution jazz.
And that so add to what Councilor Saunders said, and that the letter from Catherine Robertson be forwarded to BC Ferries to ask them if this is true and must they follow the procedure. Because she is saying that.
Okay, hold on, just 1 second.
Here.
So I'm gonna let, I just hear the typing happening furiously to my left, so I'll have our corporate officer catch up. And then maybe we can get the motion in full as she's understood it, because that would be seconded as an amendment.
So we have the full motion, I believe.
So if Councillor Morse's amendment goes through, what would the motion read as? And then we'll deal with the amendment and then get back to the main motion.
So it would be that council refer the letter to staff to contact these areas to draw a response from them regarding the reasoning to permit filming on the Pena Catalana on September 3rd. And the addition would be, and that the letter to Catherine Robertson be forwarded to basic areas to ask if the statements are true.
I think it's not September 3rd. It would be the beginning.
Oh, it's item 12.14, but she sent it on September 3rd.
The incident was the second.
Okay, so it sounds good. Okay, can we read that? Again?
That council refer the letter to staff to contact BC areas to draw a response from them regarding the reasoning to permit filming on the Pena Catalana on September 2nd. And that the letter to Catherine Robertson be forwarded to BC areas to ask if the statements are true.
So, or I wanted something in there about notification of the community as well. Did I just not hear you read that back? So after their reasoning and their lack of notification to the community.
I can reject it. Just as a suggestion. Because when we send it to BC Ferries, generally the motion gets put in the letter and sent off.
Yeah.
It might be easier to make a motion to refer both letters to BC Ferries
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
for comment and a response as to the lack of notification to the municipality.
Find that whether that needs to be worded different.
I just, Catherine is suggesting that if there's a provincial policy that applies and therefore BC Ferries can't have any filming on the fair. And I'm not sure whether that applies to me. And not a Crown Court.
Yeah, they are private. Private.
But I would like to be able to send BC Ferries response if it doesn't apply to us. Back.
So the potentially amended motion would read.
That council refer both letters to BC areas for comment and to respond as to the lack of
We need to say which one it is.
Well, to the municipality and the community. As far as I know, we didn't get any notification as well, and it was a shocking day, given it was the first day back to school. Okay, so make it super easy. We'll do that change by unanimous consent. Is there any objection? Is there any objection? So that change is made by unanimous consent. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? No, okay. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that carries that unanimous.
And I'll move that the letters at 1213 and 1214 be received.
Okay, any objection to receipt of the letters? Not seeing any, that also is received by unanimous consent. I believe that brings us to the conclusion of our consent agenda. Okay.
Now the real deal.
All right, so out of the consent agenda, moving on to business arising, 6.1, application to rezone lot 7 Adams Road. We have Prue back in, our island community planner, joining us here today.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to return to Council with further information on groundwater sensitivity and hydrogeological testing options after carrying out a site visit of the property with several councillors, receiving reports from Islands Trust on groundwater sensitivity, and receiving an updated site plan from the applicant with further conservation measures included. This application was first introduced to Council at the regular meeting of May 26th, where staff presented the rezoning proposal for Lot 7 of Adams Road to change the zoning designation from rural residential 3 to rural residential 3C in order to facilitate subdivision into 4 lots. After several members of the public wrote letters and attended the meeting to provide information and express concerns pertaining to the sensitivity of the site's groundwater recharge potential and how that would be affected by development, Council ultimately did not support the recommendation to refer the application to the committees and instead passed a resolution asking staff to set up a site visit to consider information provided by the letter writers as well as from William Shulba and to report back to Council. Following up, the site visit was carried out on July 28th and allowed councillors and staff a closer view of the creeks, groundwater conditions, site foliage on site. Staff then contacted William Shulba of Islands Trust for information and reports additional to some of the groundwater information that was brought up at the council meeting. Shulba provided 2 reports, which are included for this report as attachments. First of these reports, Islands Trust area groundwater potential mapping, includes extensive groundwater testing across several islands of study, including Bowen. Under point 6 of the conclusion section, it states that the results of groundwater recharge potential sensitivity analysis indicate that the recharge potential across most of the island is not very sensitive to changes in land use and precipitation. Under the precipitation scenarios, spatial extent of impact can be extensive. However, the magnitude of the change under these scenarios is small. On the topic of the subject property's water supply, so Shulba stated that the well report provided by the applicant shows that the well tested is sufficient to supply all 4 lots. He did recommend that the applicant completes a water management plan, which is also required under Venice land use plan. On the topic of groundwater testing, staff discussed with Shulba the applicant's concerns around carrying out multi-seasonal testing of the groundwater and how this could delay the application for a significant amount of time, requiring additional investment without assurance that the application will be supported going forwards. Shulba explained that multiple pumping tests for groundwater is an unusual requirement and that if required or recommended in most aquifers in the Islands Trust area, the dry period or times when groundwater fracture pressure and well levels are lowest is late September to mid-November. So that would be the best time to undertake a technical assessment in drought period. Finally, after further discussions on council's concerns with the applicant, Mike Lightbody provided an updated site plan which increases the amount of the property to be protected under a conservation covenant from 75 to 83%. Plan still includes 4 lots, but is realigned to reduce the length of the access driveway while still maintaining enough room for the vehicles to get to the northerly property. In order to make room for additional protected areas, the intended locations of the residences were moved further from the riparian areas, and Lightbody notes that an additional envelope could be imposed to restrict the location of structures on the property. It should be noted that there are several options under the existing zoning for the applicant to develop the property, which the applicant has discussed with staff in the event the rezoning application is not supported by council. The current RR3 zoning designation would allow subdivision of the property into 2 residential lots. In that case, while the proposal would not be subject to council's approval nor public hearing processes, staff would still have the ability to require environmental reports such as hydrogeological reports, in addition to the riparian area protections, which would still be applicable. Alternatively, without pursuing a rezoning nor subdivision process, property could still be developed for a single family dwelling with allowable lot coverage of up to 1,500 square meters In that case, the municipality would not have the ability to require additional environmental reports beyond those addressing riparian area protections, which again, would still be in effect. In conclusion, based on information provided by William Shelba of Islands Trust, it appears that the groundwater recharge potential of the subject property is not overly sensitive to changes in land use. As well, the hydrogeological tests to investigate groundwater conditions on site may be carried out during the dry season of late September to mid-November, which is coming up, and do not need to be tested during multiple seasons. The applicant has further supported the municipality's concerns around the sensitivity of the site through submitting a new site plan, placing additional areas of the property under covenant protection. The applicant is also prepared to commission a hydrogeological study of the property. Staff recommend that the application be referred to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee for comment while the applicant carries out hydrogeological testing on the property. In this way, the environmental concerns of the property may be further investigated by the applicant while the application makes its way through the committee referral process rather than being halted completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McEnany. Look to council for comments. Over to you, Council Quest.
Questions for staff?
Yep.
Yeah, my question relates to septic regulation or monitoring. I see there's 4 septic fields marked on the map, if I'm reading it correctly. And this could be 8 dwellings, I gather. And so I'm wondering, how, with what we've heard and what we've heard from the previous water sampling done by Dr. Peter Ross, in terms of contamination of groundwater for the whole Grafton Lake watershed, for example, does the municipality have any way to regulate or ask for a higher standard of septic field that to protect the watershed from contamination?
Let's take that one.
Yep.
Yeah, so the way the system works currently through the chair is that we do not do any monitoring, we do not do any preventive enforcement. Our bylaws do not allow for that. It's a complaint-driven process. Vancouver Coastal Health does have a mandate to respond, but unless there's some egregious evidence like seepage into a ditch that can be pointed to, they're not going around looking proactively at septic fields to see if they failed. So, but we do have the power to issue bylaws, and one that we are looking at right now, I've asked planning to look at this, is septic maintenance bylaws to look at how these fields are being managed, and other jurisdictions have those in place. There's also the issue of type 2 and type 3 systems that right now we haven't been adopting because there's mechanical components, and if those aren't maintained properly, then they won't work and they won't do what they need to. But the advantage of those mechanical systems is they make sites that previously you couldn't build on buildable because septic takes up less space, right? So those are things I've asked planning to look at in terms of how do we bring this forward as another tool in our toolkit to address affordable housing and do so in an ecologically sound manner. So I hope, so that's the answer. As of now, we do not have mechanisms. It's something we're looking at.
Thank you very much. A follow-up? Then with what we've heard today from our earlier presenters and from the evidence of the testing from Dr. Peter Ross that septic contamination is affecting the watershed already, I would hope to wait until we've got the proactive, as you put it, the chance to have stronger regulatory standards for septic systems in place before I looked at this in this key recharge area, and because it's also a key contamination area. It's a fast water recharge system carrying water down into the Grafton Lake watershed, I think that's a risk I don't want to take. So I would like to wait till we've got stronger septic regulations in place in our bylaws. Thank you.
Councilor Morris.
This is the rezone. Could we put conditions on the rezoning that they put in the, what I call them, these submarines, treatment plants, the NPS machines or whatever, because the effluent is sort of pre-treated in a way, so it's of a higher quality than, and they do say you can drink the water that comes out of those treatment plants. So could we make installing those mechanical treatment plants the condition for your building? And then that gets the higher quality. I mean, the big plus of this thing is it's like 85% of the land is going to be protected in the covenant. If they just do a single house, it could be a great big house and no protection. So I think it's sort of a win. They're very close to the road. It's hard to tell on the colors on this map, unfortunately, just exactly where the creek is in relation to the houses. But it's looking like it's a fair ways away. So I think I'm supporting referral to the cities and considering whether we can require the mechanical pre-treatment units as part of one of the conditions of the account.
There was a question there about being mandated a specific type of treatment. I'll look at staff for views for
Mr. Mayor, and I might defer a portion of this, I will defer a portion of this to our manager of planning, but my understanding is even in situations on Bowen where the lots are big enough to accommodate full septic fields, some of the owners of those have gone proactively to installing type 2 and type 3. So it is possible for the developer to do this. As for the mandate aspect of it, I'll defer that to our manager of planning to comment on that aspect.
Through the chair. I don't think we have any currently in effect, but at first blush, I would think that that's appropriate for a section 219 covenant that's placed on title at time of rezoning that requires an owner to do something proactively. And so, since it would be what we would envision would be in a septic maintenance bylaw that could just be enforced on a property through covenants.
From my understanding, I haven't looked at this particular lot before in any shape or form. My understanding is that there's been previous applications with respect to development of this lot that didn't go forward or that were withdrawn in terms of community opposition. So since I've been on council, and certainly with respect to the Islands Trust policy statement and some of the other research that's coming up from the Conservancy locally, water's becoming a huge issue. It's basically the main conversation that we had at the open house Saturday. And I'm wondering if are there any other tricks in our bag that we can use to, if we identified this area on the map that was in the delegation as being the dark black critical recharge area. Is there anything else that we've got in terms of, we must know that there's other areas that are on this map that are white and pale and can adopt. Can we get developers together and do some sort of density transfers or some way of protecting this area for the community water system and, figuring out ways of getting, I don't know, it's an economic thing for the developer, but it's also an ecological thing for the community. So trying to figure out ways of working through that conflict. Is there any, I'd be interested in terms of maybe raising the question with the APC or with the environmental committee for staff to help brainstorm and come up with ideas in terms of whether or not there's anything else that can be done involving possibly other developers.
Just through the chair, I mean, I would say, like, council's main indicator is through things like the official community plan that lays out present and proposed land uses. And so that is appropriate for council if they have a report that says certain areas are, you know, more environmentally sensitive, to say, okay, we want to actually review and amend our official community plan so that we don't want to designate those sensitive areas for future growth. We want to direct it elsewhere. That's part of the function of an OCP. And say in a land use bylaw, like council is able to reduce the allowable development by a site without compensation, provided that it's not being restricted just to use as a public use. But it is appropriate. That is why council has powers over land use in the OCP and the zoning, is to take information like sensitive areas mapping or whatever else and say, this is how we want to, you know, guide development on the island towards areas that are less sensitive.
Not seeing any further comments. Is there recommendation put on the floor, a motion put on the floor?
I'll move the council refer application RZ 2025-0015 to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Parks Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee for a recommendation. And the council directs staff to report back with the results of the referral.
Moved by Councillor Morse. Seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. Any debate on the motion? Councillor Lake.
I think given the direction we're heading and given the what we've heard report, it has come back to the OCP steering committee. It's pretty clear that this isn't a one-off, you know, we're gonna have more and more of this moving forward. So why wouldn't we give ourselves the well, if we have to go through the OCP, I'm not sure we do have to go through the OCP. Can we not just amend the land use bylaw to require or limit development in a site for reasons of protection?
I did ask the presenters on our delegation earlier if they were suggesting that the site not be built on, and the answer was no. So I think we should proceed at this point to the referral to committees. There's no harm doing that.
Just to add, I mean, the answer wasn't yes either, to be clear from my interpretation, and I'm fine with the referral. And I would need to chew on some of the information, the data that we're getting back, particularly in Grafton Lake watershed, both the presenters today, the work that the Rain Coast Foundation has done, and the work that our OCP steering committee is doing, especially given the municipal context where we're in the midst of developing a watershed management plan for Grafton Lake. And it sounds like we've got some work to do on septic servicing bylaws as well. So that would color any decision that I have when this recommendation comes back to council. But I would very much like to hear the wisdom and advice and recommendation of our advisory planning committee, as well as the Parks Environment Climate Action Committee as well. So I'm okay for the referral, but I'm definitely looking to see more information coming back, given what's in play in our policy offer as is. Councilor Pastor.
Yeah, thank you. I'm nothing against the committees. I just think that it's premature to refer this to committees while we know that the Grafton Lake Water Management Plan, the Watershed Management Plan is in the works, while we know that the septic maintenance bylaw is in the works, while the OCP steering committee is just receiving the new information that's becoming available from Islands Trust. And Rain Coast at, Dr. Peter Ross, and I just think it's too early. And I would like to, now that we know, as council, we know that this is a sensitive groundwater recharge area, I think we should wait. So I'll be voting against it. Nothing against the canoes. Thank you.
That's been motion to postpone. Not seeing any further comments, I will call the question for a referral. All in favor, raise your hand, and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand, and say nay.
Nay.
Nay, and that carries with Councilor Lake, Fast, and Mayor Leonard. Mr. Bannikin, moving on to 8.1 Grafton Lake Housing Agreement, we have Dane Martin, our planner, manager of planning and development, here with us today. Oh, sorry, 7.1, my apologies, development procedures for Indigenous governing bodies. We have planner one, Xerxes Au, joining us here today. I believe this is Au's first appearance in front of council.
It is.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just here to introduce the procedures within the bylaw. So just to start, brief intro of the development procedures bylaw. Our development procedures bylaw 2019 regulates and prescribes how municipalities' development applications are processed, referrals are handled, and fees are dealt with. Through the development procedures bylaw, council has delegated a lot of process through to the manager of planning and development. Right now, our development procedures bylaw has two clauses on how to refer development applications. Agencies, organizations, and different levels of governments are given a minimum of 30 days, and Islands Trust has given a minimum of 45 days from date of referral to provide comments. So staff have consulted with Squamish Nation staff on a time period. They would prefer in regards to referrals and what types of development applications they wish to have be referred to them. Examples that Scottish Nation staff provided to municipality staff include watershed and stream and riparian development permits, applications that may affect salmon habitat, and development applications that may affect archaeological areas. Scottish Nation staff have proposed a time period of 60 to 90 days. Yeah, so our proposed amendment would add definition for Indigenous governing body and provide a time period of 6 to 9 days for comments. And in conclusion, staff recommended that the amendment bylaw be given first reading.
Thank you, the planner, and questions, Councilor Morse.
We refer if we know there's possibility of artifacts or significant cultural reasons. Do we have a list? Do we know? Is there an access somewhere, or are you going to have to refer everything because you suspect it could, but you don't know whether it does have cultural significance or artifacts?
We do have like a provincial database of archaeological sites on the municipality, and we have like a buffer area where we would refer.
So staff can access that list.
Yes.
I don't think the general public can.
Yes, staff can access the list. It's not available to the general public.
Thank you, Councilor Morse. Councilor Gill.
My understanding is that the provincial registry is underdeveloped, that people are not eager to have potentially archaeological sites registered in terms of that becomes public and it's potentially subject to disturbance, but the Squamish Nation has just put out a report with respect to forestry and areas that they consider to be culturally significant. So is there a way of asking them if there's other areas of cultural significance other than forestry management that we should be aware of? I guess that's asking in terms of the relationship that you've been building with Squamish, are we able to tap into the people that have some knowledge about potentially significant areas? This is the map that they've given us on forestry is very, very limited. And that we know that there were other sites that were identified out at Cape Roger Curtis, for instance, in terms of the development of the potential camping idea. So there was one area there that we could map it out. And I've heard of others that are across the island. But I think it needs to open up some dialogue. Not relying just on the provincial archaeological register.
So thank you. I'm gonna give Ruth Flanner an assist here, seeing as this is the first time up and these are tough questions. So the province does have what's the short acronym is the RAD system. It's basically an archaeological database. You are correct. There's certain sensitive sites, such as burial sites, that a First Nation doesn't want advertised because they could be desecrated in some way. So as part of any due diligence, typically we would consult the RAD, or if somebody who's doing the archaeological work would do that, but they would also reach out to the First Nation for any knowledge of sites that they might have. And in that process, they could ask for a site visit to be done as part of that. But any full process should, in addition to looking at the province's database, should also have direct outreach to the First Nation. And we, with Squamish in particular, we do that through Squamish Connect, which is a staff-to-staff resource where we can put our queries directly to them. They don't want us to just pick up the phone and phone them. They want us to be directed through Squamish Connect, and that's our process. It's a big yes. Huge yes.
Thank you. I didn't see a question for the planner. It's just, I see in your report, you mentioned Crown land referrals. That would include both Crown lands for forestry applications or proposals, I gather, as well as for docks or, water exchange or anything like that, that people were applying for. Is that correct?
Yes, for the curious, we would play as well, things like docks.
Great. So, because in my experience on other islands, that's usually where, and on Bowen over the years, that a lot of sites, if they're going to show up, might show up on a shoreline. But anyway, I was happy to see the Crown and the shoreline and to have this discussion open up with Squamish staff so that theoretically it could evolve as well as our bylaws do over time. So I'm happy to move the motion when you're ready. I'm in favor.
If there's any speakers in the list, feel free to.
Okay. I move that bylaw number 699, 2025, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Development Procedures bylaw number 494, 2019, amendment bylaw number 699, 2025, be read a first time.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, the planner, for being here today. For surviving your first council presentation. Now moving on to 8.1, Grafton Lake Housing Agreement. We have Mr. Martin, our planner, our manager of planning development.
for today. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm here today to talk about a housing agreement governing affordable housing projects around Lake. So by way of overview, in 2018, council approved a development proposal on Grafton Lake to approve up to 165 homes. I'm just starting that because I noticed there's an error in the council report of the number of homes, but 165 homes, including a commitment to provide 45 units of affordable housing. So a number exceeding the affordable housing policy target of 15%. In discussion with council, and you see links in the report to past council discussions, the applicant is to be provided 10 units of affordable home ownership on the north side of Grafton Road in the sort of first phase of development, and then 35 units of affordable rental on the south side of Grafton Road. And so where we are now, the parcel for the 10 units of affordable home ownership was created in the initial subdivision around Grafton Lake. And we have come before council in the past with an initial proposal for a housing agreement that would govern the affordable home ownership component of those units. But for various reasons, that proposal has not progressed. The applicant has proposed a new iteration of this development that is before you. Just by way of map context, this is where we are. So the map on the left is showing that first phase of the subdivision with the lots in gray being the fee simple or the strata lots. The sort of brownish color is the lot that was created for the home ownership parcel. The pink is the Copiah water treatment plant, and the red is a single family home lot that has an existing single family home on it. So if you come down, and then up to the green is the part that dedicated to the municipality. And so if you go down the road today to the water treatment plant, you'll see sort of the site of where the home ownership parcels were proposed. You'll see the culverts and the driveway sort of that are roughed in for that development.
On your right-hand side as you go towards the tree.
Correct, on the hillside on your right. So you see in your package in the developer's current proposal. So what the developer is proposing is to spread the smaller lots across both the parcel, that 10 unit parcel, and the adjacent single family home lot to create 11 fee simple lots from ranging in size from 5 to 8,000 square feet. The developer is proposing to sell the lots to primarily local builders and trades in need of housing to construct their own houses. So this is in comparison to earlier proposals where the developer would construct the housing and sell to eligible purchasers. The developer is proposing that the resale restrictions on the lot be eliminated so they would be resold at market rates. And in lieu of the resale restrictions, developer is proposing to provide the municipality with a total of $1 million in funding delivered at the time of subdivision for $100,000 per lot, and that to include in a housing agreement a limitation on sales to Bowen residents or workers. And the staff recommendation at this point is to refer this development proposal to Birch under terms of our partnering agreement to act as a community housing organization for comment on the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Questions for the planner?
A couple of comments, I guess. So just to make absolutely clear, under the covenant, the developer is required to build these units.
Through the chair, under the covenant, yes, it contemplates the developer constructing the units and selling units as opposed to lots.
Okay, so if he gives us $1 million and then they sell the lots, A, they pocketed all the money for selling the lots, and B, they've got to be built, there's no resale, and we can't build those lots for, I mean, it's gonna be $300,000 for at least for a 1,000 square foot house. And 300,000 times 10 is 3 million in mine. So I don't see that this is going to accomplish us getting any housing built. And they were supposed to build it, and they can't do phase 2 until they build it. So if he spent all his money on prepping for phase 2, then we're planning on his part.
Council Nick followed by Councilor Griggs.
um, just to follow up on Councilor Moore's comments, I've been familiar with this back and forth and the developer trying to work out alternatives. The developer recognized at least 2 years ago that they just wouldn't be able to produce. The theory was, and actually I was involved way back in the creation of this idea, that the developer would build in a cost neutral fashion. So that basically they would be able to sell them for what it cost them to build them. And that would be affordable. Well, it's not going to be affordable. So we're not going to get affordable housing by sticking with what we've got here. The idea here is that we do have contractors on the island who have the ability to build their own housing at a more affordable level. And so the idea is these lots will be sold to island residents and employees, contractors, who can then build their own place affordably. And so to call it market, it's not like they're gonna turn around and flip them. They need to have this housing in order to keep contractors and employees on the island, which is something we really want. So this makes sense to me, and the recommendation that's forwarded to Birch, refer it to Birch, makes good sense, because that's our community housing organization, and they have other means of building housing more affordably, and those will be able to be applied to the 35 lots or units in phase 2 and 3.
So could you repeat that last sentence? The
35 lots that will be for affordable housing on phase 2 and phase 3.
Thank you. I just have a water in my.
Councilor Wade, Councilor Jurgensen.
Sorry, the manager of planning and development. If I understand correctly, they wish to remove the resale cap on the lots. Meaning that they can be sold for whatever going forward as they go through the resale process. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
That, to me at least, sounds like right out of the gate, affordability goes out the window. But my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, if you could go back to the map, this would mean that the 10 small lots would be spread over both those brown sections of the map, correct?
Correct. So the brown is where it was originally proposed, and sort of more orangey brown.
Yes.
As well. Yes.
Okay, and there's an existing building on a home on the orangey brown one?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. I'm interested in referring this to Birch, because they might be able to give us advice about how we could keep it affordable. As somebody who lives in a house on a lot that is this size, I think it's a sustainable kind of housing. It's affordable compared to lots of the other housing on Bowen. If you want to use that, it's small. And in the official community plan, we do have a policy for preserving and creating diverse housing. So not all big lot. Anyway, so it sounds like it would only be affordable to the first people, but then market sale. I would be interested in referring it to Birch to get their suggestion on how would that qualify as affordable, or if they've got any advice for us. So I'd actually currently in favor of this motion.
Just a question I have, so given that the original development proposal predates my time here on council, I'm curious what's happening with the 35 units of rental housing? Whether, like, where's that going?
The chair, we've had sort of initial conversations about how that would be delivered. Back at time of rezoning, I think we had discussions about what criteria we use for affordable rental, about different sort of forms of it being delivered. But I don't believe we've had any recent conversations. Sometime I know recently we've talked about Birch in particular with the partnered agreement and about the potential for them to be involved in future phases. But I don't think.
Okay. I suppose just in the long term, I'm curious about how that's going to play out and whether, okay, we improve this and then down the road, we're getting another proposal to amend another 35 units of affordable housing. So given that it was approved as a development, like I'd like to see the plans overall as a development. I'm fine with it being referred to Birch, but again, this is another proposal that strikes questions for me, given what we're seeing in the region too, where we're seeing, it's no comment on the specific developer, but we're seeing developments in Vancouver, in Surrey, in North and West Vancouver, where affordable housing was committed to. And then a few years later, citing financial considerations and concerns, which are ever present in the world, that they're no longer able to deliver on it. So I'm curious about the development as a whole and the notion. So the follow-up question I have is related to the piece here where sell the lots to primarily local builders and trades in need of housing to construct their houses, earlier proposals for the developer to construct housing. So, to my knowledge, there's land available on Bowen to purchase that doesn't have houses on it already. So I question whether there's a pent-up demand for contractors to build their own house on the island, and sort of what are the provisions that it actually goes that way, and that we're not just going to end up in a situation where we're going to sell land that was agreed upon to be affordable housing, into regular market pieces, should this not sell to developers or contractors, or should it not sell to local lending contractors? And so what's the provision to ensure that it actually goes to this market of contractors that are looking to build homes on the island?
Do we know that market exists?
Yeah, so that's what I'm curious about. Like, does that market actually exist, or like, what are the provisions in this proposal to ensure that that's the way that it goes, and that we're not going to be back here a year from now, 2 years from now with, oh, hey, we couldn't find local contractors, and we've got to sell it to that market, and there's still this 35 units of unbuilt rental housing that was agreed upon previously as well.
Yeah, through the chair, I think we've had sort of initial conversations with the developer about the housing agreement still being in place for the initial purchase, and sort of different ways that could be managed. Like, I know for the original proposal, it was proposed that there be a wait list that people get pre-registered or in some way qualify for the housing, or we talk about, lottery system or whatever else. And so I think that would be part of the conversation with Birchie, but is how is that established? If we go down the road of this proposal and there's 10 lots for sale at X price, how is that selected? Is the developer selling it based on who they feel is most need, or is there some role for Birch in that process, or the municipality?
Councilor Wake.
So there is no certainty about how this is going to play out, but we're also faced with a problem, not here, but everywhere in DC, where it's just getting harder and harder to create affordable housing. And it's pretty much impossible, and I would argue it's been impossible for quite some time for market developers to build housing affordably. Because their whole mindset is make it more expensive, not make it less expensive. And for the marketing. So where we, I think, should be headed is more nonprofit housing, non-market housing. And so we want to, you know, I get it that we can put something in the housing agreement that refines who these contractors might be or what criteria. You know, we should certainly look at doing that. But the concept that they can build a lot more cheaply than you or me going out and hiring a contractor to build it and paying them, I think this is very real. And these aren't going to be, you know, market lots that are going to be incredibly attractive to people. They're small. It's sort of a barren rock site. And so to a certain extent, I think this could be a way out for contractors who are exactly in this situation. And I think they will be, obviously, if they purchase them, they're purchasing, you know, there was the comment about there's other land available. These lots are going to be a lot less expensive than the land that's available. So that is the first step in making it affordable. The second step is having the contractors build their own and having contractors do deals where, you know, I'll do your electrical if you do my plumbing connect. So I think it's a concept that's worth trying. I don't see a better way to do it.
I'm not familiar with the original deal that was made in terms of what was traded back and forth in terms of getting this and, you know, allowing something else. So I'm interested in the referral to Birch with the understanding that they are focusing on the affordability aspect. So I'm not sure that taking the limit of taking it out of the developer being responsible for building and coming up with something that is quality and affordable and much like we're getting with the other project from Birch, but you know, it isn't necessarily 10 separate dwellings and being most affordable. And you know, I refer back to the letter that we talked about before that McGilvery had sent us in 4.3 in terms of little community developments, and that is providing affordability. So when we talked about Artisan Square, we talked about having artisans living in the apartments of and having their little workshops and things down below. And that, you know, it was really good in terms of sales, but it never could happen in terms of who was available for the rental and whether or not the artisans wanted both amount of space that was partly commercial and partly residential. So it's all very well to say that, you know, we're going to target the contractors, you know, but they may be in suitable housing. They may not want to have a spec house, or they might want to have a spec house, or, you know, whatever. So I don't know that we can necessarily decide or limit it to who can be building it. We need to come up with some sort of a plan in terms of possibly a comprehensive plan or a larger development plan. And I think Birch is well suited to that. So I'm happy with this referral. I'm not convinced that it should change in terms of going from contractors or the developer's responsibility to free market. So, and I don't know that that would necessarily protect us in terms of affordability. Yes, they're smaller, and yes, that would mean it would be less expensive than a 10-acre waterfront, but it's not necessarily affordable depending on all the costs are for each individual place, so. I'm happy to refer to Birch and get more information from them.
Maybe let's get the referral on the floor and we can discuss from there. That's good.
I recommend, or I move that council refer the development proposal contained in the staff report dated August 25th, 2025 to Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing, bracket Birch, under the terms of its partnering agreement to act as a community housing organization for climate.
Second,
Second that one.
comments on the referral? Yes.
I'm okay with the referral because all we're asking for is comments on the proposal. I'm still not keen on the proposal.
No, and so my only comments are, so there's a figure thrown out here of what it would cost to effectively unwind a commitment that was made during your zoning process, and what I'd like to get at is what's the fair value for unwinding? Because if I put myself in the shoes of a council that approved a significant rezoning in a previous term, the content of affordable housing is what that's significantly what would have made that affordable attractive to council and approved it to council. So there's an unwinding of commitments that were made during our rezoning process of council agreeing to a rezoning and a developer coming to the table and saying, okay, because of this density, because of what we're asking, we're going to put a condition of, we're going to accept your condition of building 45 units of affordable housing to date, which we had 0. So if that agreement between previous council and this municipality and that developer is going to stand, it's like, what's the fair value in exchange for unwinding an agreement that was previously agreed to? So whether Birch wants to comment on that or whether staff needs to do some work as to what is a fair figure to unwind that agreement with the municipality and put this back into market housing. And given that we don't have 35 rental units built, do we strengthen the language of getting those 35 units built? Do we strengthen the dollar value of, or get a fair market value of what it takes to remove those 10 additional units of affordable housing into the municipality so that we can build it elsewhere or create the conditions to build it elsewhere? Those are some of the concerns that I'd like to see addressed before we even consider something like this at the council table. Not seeing, yes, Councillor Fast.
Oh, just to say, yes, I support your thinking as a member of the previous council. I am concerned about unwinding commitments and what kind of a model that sets in place for this developer and other developers to have an expectation or to keep coming to council asking for unwinding. It was a commitment. On the other hand, I don't want 45 units of affordable housing to sit in a nice plan that's up on a wall somewhere and never be built. So I'm interested in the comments from Birch, but I can't support the proposal as it is at the moment. I understand it be sooner, proposed to be sooner, and affordable for a short period of time to the first come, first serve people. I'm interested in how to keep it affordable for the long term if this proposal can do that. So, but I'll support this one to refer to Birch.
In terms of what happens with the other 35, we don't have to worry about that part of it right now. I don't think we have to. This is complicated, and at this point, we want to get something happening on those 10 lots so that we can talk about approving the phase 2 and phase 3. So I think we can do this in stages, and I think we've got to recognize that, and it'll be very interesting to hear back from Birch. One of the questions we can ask Birch is, okay, if you just had this land, could you build a 10-unit building and make it affordable? And if they can, well, maybe there's a different deal we can do. But I'll be very interested to see what they have to say.
Okay, not seeing any further comments on referral, I'll call the question, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye, any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 8.2, introduction of an asset management policy, over to Karen Dillon, our CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may beg council's indulgence to first take this opportunity to introduce a new member of our team. We're very excited. Miss Basari, could you please come to the speaker's table? I have the pleasure today of introducing Sarah Kasari, who's going to be our new manager of infrastructure on Bowen Island. Sarah brings over 20 years of experience in project engineering and management. She is a registered professional engineer in British Columbia and also holds certifications as a lead accredited professional, building design and construction, and a project management professional. So maybe she can work with our facilities manager in figuring out why this room was so stuffy today. She earned her master's degree in civil engineering from the University of British Columbia with a specialization in engineering management. Before joining Bowen Island, Sarah held several senior leadership roles with the city of Burnaby. Her work there included managing capital projects in the lands and facilities department, leading municipal initiatives across engineering, parks, recreation, and cultural services, and overseeing the delivery of complex infrastructure projects. I'm excited, we're excited, everybody's excited to welcome Sarah to the team. We look forward to the expertise and leadership she brings to our infrastructure portfolio, and I'm happy to add another piece that I feel is going to level us up as an organization, and happy to do so on my 1-year anniversary. It was actually 1 year ago today, I had my first council meeting. So with that, I invite Ms. Basari to say a few brief words, and hopefully there's not too many tough questions. Remember. Oh, thanks.
The mayor, thank you so much, the CEO. I'm very excited here. It's a beautiful community, and I'm looking forward to make an impact. Basically, when I was hearing all the conversations about water and wastewater, I got even more excited because my thesis was on a wastewater treatment plan, biological wastewater treatment plan at UBC. So this is an honor to work for such a beautiful community. I see everyone is so passionate about the environment, water, wastewater treatment, and it just aligns with my value. If you have any questions, yes.
Welcome. That's it. Oh my God. So I don't know if you have to catch it very early today, but you're free to stay as long as you want in council chambers, but we're well excited. So.
Thank you. This is great. Welcome. Yeah. I'll be interested to, I was thinking as we had those earlier discussions about water supply and quality and wastewater and managing that, how half of the island is on provincial wells, not municipal wells, and we still need to maintain water for everybody. And how do we make it all fair? And same with septics. How do we keep the water quality fair for everyone when so much of it was set in place so long ago and all that kind of thing? I'm curious what your insights will be. Welcome aboard.
Mr. Mayor, that's a very good question. A little heavy for the first day.
Oh, come on.
So maybe we'll come back at a future mayor's task force on infrastructure and address that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just excited. Yes, welcome aboard, and I just, they're just questions that are hovering, and I look forward to your experience. Of course, to the mayor, I'm very excited as well, and honestly, I have to go through the documents and kind of read and research about what is there right now and what are the concerns. I'm not familiar with the community, with the infrastructure, so I won't be able to answer your questions next year, a year from now, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Mayor, with that, I can go back to item 8.2. I do have a 9 slide presentation. I'm just gonna leave it to you if you want to receive that, or we can go right to the substance of the actual policy.
Would encourage us to go right to the substance of the actual policy.
Okay, so are there any questions? I just to frame this broadly, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has a readiness scale. Asset Management BC has a framework for asset management programs. One of the first items on the roadmap is actually having a policy. There was a draft policy somewhere in the nether regions of our filing system, never saw the light of day. I looked at that, refined it. I'm bringing it forward to present to council for adoption so that we actually have a policy on the books and in the spirit of the FCM readiness scale. And there were specific questions: who champions it, who implements it, all these things. So asset management and the policy itself, I would expect that council would champion it. I would sponsor it as CAO, and staff would implement the policy. So, and it covers several items here. And this is all under the policy and governance framework that's provided in the attachment. So with that, I present it and open the floor to any specific questions.
Councilor Morris, Councilor Wade, Councilor Fast.
This has been on the to-do list for I don't know how many years. And I'm assuming as we go forward, if it's not working, it needs tweaking, then we can tweak it. So let's just have a policy and get on with it and tweak it as we go along if it needs tweaking. Rather than. Is that?
Yeah, it's a living document, and I wholeheartedly agree. That's why I decided let's just get it done and get it on the books.
So then my next question is, when are we gonna get a report on the status of all the assets we have and what their situation is?
So we will get that through the chair. We'll get our asset report cards with the budget documents this year. Our team has already put those in place for roads and things. We have a road condition assessment that's going to be starting this fall. RFP, if not, is going out soon. I think we've been waiting for a manager of infrastructure to review it before it goes out. And so we'll have that data. So you can expect to see something around December. And I've given a little bit of a mandate letter to our new manager of infrastructure, and that's one of the things I prioritize further in the first year to get us more data on these assets.
And I guess the other question is in coming up with the list of here's the asset, here's its state. Is there a risk measurement of what's the risk if it fails?
That
in order to prioritize which gets fixed.
it's not going to be explicitly an asset report card, but it's like in Bowen Island. I mean, it's quite easy for us to assign risk to these things. I mean, if something happens to Bowen Island Trunk Road, that's one route in and out. That's high risk corridor that would up the risk, or a major water main. It's something we could perhaps look at trying to incorporate into the asset report cards, but in terms of our decision making going forward in the capital program, engineering judgment comes into place. So we would be prioritizing in our 5, 10, 20-year capital plans based on the risk understanding as we see it as engineers.
Not quite the answer. All right, fine. I say maybe, and it's following FCM's guidelines and the province's guidelines for the Asset Management Association. Are we members of the Asset Management Association?
We are members of Asset Management BC, I believe, and we recently won a photo contest. And so Rachel will be going for free
Yeah.
Is that happening yet, or is that about to happen? In Richmond, right? It's free trip. to
Sunny Richmond. Great food. Councilor Wade.
This is a very thorough and complete report. Excellent work, and I'd be happy to make the recommendation.
We'll clear the speakers list and then we'll do the recommendation. Councilor Fast, follow that. Councilor Day.
Thank you. Yeah, I like this little document. It's a 3-pager, so it's not that big, but it's got the major policies there, including risk. I see 2 about risk, and then I'm also really pleased to see the natural assets, green infrastructure kinds of things included in this policy 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is terrific. So to me, this falls under our strategic program of completing work that's been started. And here's a step we can actually take. So I'm happy to second Tim Wake's motion.
Hasn't moved yet, but we'll. I see you, Councilor Jurgensen. Speakers list is closed. Once we get the recommendation on the floor, I'll come back to you. But Councilor Getty was on the speakers lists.
So I'm very pleased with the report and I'm very pleased that we're moving forward on this. It has been a long time coming. And it's going to help us reduce the number of surprises that we've got in terms of something blowing up that we didn't predict. I'd be very interested in having the FCM checklist and all those little boxes ticked off at some point before one of our strategic planning sessions, so that we have some idea of where we are and what needs to be done and how to. I think that checklist that they provide would help us with that strategy. Anyway, thank you. The resources that you attached are very helpful in the policy. I sent you an email saying that I would have these are pedantic about all the numbers and the labeling of the alphabetizing of things, but I'm not going to sit and fill on that. I do have one small typo in your overriding report that I'll point out to you, but it's not going to change the whole anything. So later.
Over to you to move the motion, Councilor.
I move the council adopt CP-25-03 Asset Management Council Policy as outlined in attachment 1 of the report entitled Asset Management Council Policy, presented at the regular council meeting on September 8th, 2025, to guide the sustainable management of municipal assets on Bullen Avenue.
Okay. Moved by Councilor Witt, seconded by Councilor Fast. Discussion on the motion. I'll look to you, Councilor Harris.
I'm happy to support the recommendation. Really like the policy. I think there'll be a lot of big help going forward.
Any further speakers on the motion before I call the question? Not seeing any. I will call the question. All in favor, as you can say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Thank you to the CEO for your work on this. As Councilor Moore said, this is a long time. I'm going to look forward to implementations of the course. It's been a good course. Thank you. Moving on to 8.3, introduction of the local area service funding policy. We have our CFO, Kristen Watson, joining us here today.
Thank you, through the mayor to the rest of council. I'm bringing forward the first of 2 local area service funding policies today. The first is a general overview policy of how the municipality establishes funding sources for its 8 local area services. The second will be a specific one fit for the needs of the West Side 3, Bullen Bay, Blue Water Park, King Edward Bay that are harmonizing their operations. So it will be a specific policy just set for that one. But to begin with the overview policy, it's been developed as a result of Council Directive 23-44, which came out of a recommendation from the Ombudsperson office that stated that we should have a policy framework in place in order to set out how we go about funding for local area services. This policy is needed because unlike most municipalities where the utility services are delivered from the same system to all of the properties within the municipality, we have a very fragmented system in Bowen Island. We have 7 separate unique water systems and 1 sewer system that serves a very small proportion of the municipality's residents. So because there are such a significant portion of the island's population that don't connect to these services, that don't benefit from these services, they really do need to be self-funded, and we need to set out the framework by which we fund these. So this policy will formalize that practice. It's been in place since we incorporated, but it provides, by putting it into policy, it's providing a very transparent process by which council can access funding to pay for all of the different utilities. So this policy confirms that local area services should be self-funded and identifies the eligible funding sources. There, of course, are parcel taxes and user rates, external borrowing, of course, and as well, it sets out a formal process to access an internal borrowing of funds, and sets out the requirement for a term to be established for repayment of those funds. So the draft policy, I believe, as part of due process, should be made available for public feedback prior to adoption. And so the recommendation today that I'm making to council is that the policy be received for information and that it be made available for public consultation. So I'm happy to receive council feedback or answer questions in regards to this draft policy.
Questions or comments from council? The recommendation, Council Getty? It's a very vague question in my mind, but in terms of the funding grants that are available, provincially and possibly federally, if there's these kinds of arrangements in terms of and funding from the general fund in particular, I think is a new. And that's spelled out as a process that we have in place. Does that limit the I guess the availability and our whether or not we can apply for certain grants? If there's ways of dealing with it locally, do we put ourselves outside of funding programs? The ones that exist now that we know of. There's no way of knowing about the future.
So in the case of a grant program that's targeted for water or sewer, we would launch an application on behalf of a project that we felt was a good candidate to be eligible for funding and make a strong funding case for it. Those grants that are received in respect of a specific project application, grant-based application, such as the one in Eagle Cliff, those are grants that wouldn't otherwise be available to municipality general. So we're not taking away funding opportunities from municipal general. Where that does happen is when we take funds that are not typically part of an application-based program, but rather they're per capita grants that are just awarded to the municipality. They don't require a grant. So we have community works funds, which are awarded to the municipality and are available to be used on roads, on culverts, on any number of other municipal infrastructure. So those types of grant programs are the ones that we consider to be part of general funds, and we would be looking for a repayments program because we're taking them that otherwise would be available to address our infrastructure needs. So I don't know if I answered your questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Morris?
Just a couple of clarifications on the list of Snuncoke sewer systems where money's been spent. The 720,000 was done because we got a Towns for Tomorrow grant to expand the system. And that was put in because we were the developer, because we wanted to be able to develop our properties on the community lands. And so those that's why that 720 was put in. And the same with the Miller Road extension, we needed the line run down the road so that we could hook up the fire hall and things like that. So those weren't just given to the Snug Cove sewer. The lift station repair, I can't recall the discussion about that one. And I know I voted against the one in 2022, and I can't remember what I did with the one in 2021. And in the staff report, or where the policy was cited, there's one policy in our budgeting, financial planning and budgeting policy guidelines that isn't mentioned. And that very clearly says that all these specified areas or local service areas will be self-funded. So that is another reason for it. And if I'm understanding this correctly, the only way that general funds could be accessed is through borrowing from the general fund. You're not.
And approved by council resolution.
Yeah, but because not blanket subs put in as tax. No, like capacity upgrade, the 1,740,000, you're not posing that ever happened again.
Not without a council resolution and discussion and clear conversation in public about, but it's a reasoning for it.
But yeah, okay, so that's one of the things I want to clarify, because I think they should all be self-funding, and policy should be very clear that the only way you're going to access general fund funds is through borrowing from the specified area.
Yes, that is set up in the policy.
And I wanted to make sure that that was your understanding of what would be set out there, and that there would be no opportunity for what happened in 2022 to happen again.
That's set out in 0.7 of the policy.
But your answer was just not without a council resolution.
To approve it, it requires a council resolution, and it is subject to 0.7 of that policy.
So it must be reading.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Morse. Passed.
Just that I'm happy to see this. Thank you. I think this is good clarification. It sets out that expectation that local service areas remain primarily self-funded. So that's clear information for the community and everybody else out there. And my question is, King Edward Bay, Bowen Bay, and Blue Water, that's going to come to a later meeting?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm happy to make the motion.
No other first-time speakers on the floor. We'll get the motion on the floor. Yes,
I move that council receive the draft local area service funding policy for information, and that council direct staff to proceed with public engagement on the draft policy.
Second. Moved by Councilor Fast, seconded by Councilor Morse, and then Councilor Getty, if you want to be first on the speakers list to the motion.
All right, I'm wondering if there is a conflict between the definition of general fund. The last sentence says it finances the provision of services, programs, infrastructure that benefit the community as a whole. And then the other section that you just referred to, 6 and 7, internal financing. It ensures the long-term costs of local service areas are not allocated to general taxpayers while providing flexibility for LSAs to access needed funding to complete capital upgrades.
I don't see a conflict in there. What it's trying to address is the fact that if we only look to external borrowing to fund long-term capital upgrades, that is all subject to elector approval. The risk that we face in that case is that the electors don't approve the borrowing, and that leaves us with our hands tied as to how to get funding. So from time to time, there will be the opportunity, providing that there's adequate cash flow to manage a short-term or a longer-term loan from the general fund to the local area service fund, in order for us to move forward and undertake those capital upgrades without requiring that referendum or that alternative assent process. So this just speaks to how those internal transfers will be managed. I don't see that there's a conflict in it.
I'm just, this is going for referral to the community.
Yeah.
So we'll get feedback from the public, but my just in the brief conversation that we've had here today, the last sentence under the definition of general fund, it needs to me to be different from what you're talking about in 6 and 7. So I would just, my comment would be just to keep a heads up and to think about that.
Okay.
That's it.
And if you want to share any additional thoughts with me offline that you had, I'm happy to receive that feedback too.
Thank you. Any further questions or debate on the motion of them? Seeing any, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hands high. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 8.4, application for an encroachment permit at 1082 Miller Road. We have Rachel Price Jones, our public works lawyer, doing this here today.
Good afternoon, Mayor Leonard. With Mayor to the rest of council today to present an application for an encroachment permit at 1082 Miller Road to receive council direction on how to move forward with it. The property in question is located on the northeast corner of the BIM owned property Lot B and is proposed for development by the Snug House Society as an independent seniors residence. In connection with the development, the applicant has applied for an encroachment permit for installation of permanent soil anchors and shotcrete shoring system to be located under and within the property line of Lot B. Because the proposed anchors will remain in place permanently, staff recommend establishing an easement and covenant. The proposed anchors do not impede the general use of that land, which is defined as a non-invasive encroachment in the traffic and use of streets bylaw. Using a per square meter calculation, the annual fee for the encroachment would start at $598. That's annual. Please note the annual fee may change when the assessed value of the land increases. So given that staff are considering 1082 Miller Road as a suitable candidate under the traffic and use of streets bylaw for encroachments, staff recommend that council authorize entering the encroachment permit with 1082 Miller Road to support Snug Cove House development. If you have any questions, please.
Councilor
So I got confused by the use of traffic and streets bylaw. So we're not connecting under a road. We're just using that bylaw, that encroachment agreement as a law.
The encroachment
Looking at the map.
permit is attached as an amendment to the traffic and use of streets bylaw. So we don't technically have an encroachment bylaw. It's the encroachment permit and application within the traffic and use of streets bylaw.
So because it's not a road that it's going under, do we need a bylaw that the encroachment agreement fits under, or can we just use the form of that encroachment agreement? Do we need a bylaw that authorizes
No.
encroachments?
No, we don't. That's,
Just to be clear though, we already have a bylaw that authorizes encroachments.
Yeah.
That we passed it
But
as.
it's for it's the use of streets bylaw.
Yeah, so but it does handle my understanding is that it handles encroachments in this context.
Well, I guess
Just
that would
main
be
traffic
we're
uses.
basically using an encroachment agreement that's a model in the use of streets bylaw, rather than saying we have to, it's not being done under the use of streets bylaw, it's not a street that encroachments.
Okay.
Maybe we need to change the bylaw to use of streets in public places.
Yeah, that would be my question. Does this encroachment fall under the jurisdiction of that bylaw?
it is a permit for municipal property, municipal owned land. So that I believe would fall under this policy, this bylaw.
Well, as long as I have to go back and look at the actual file, but if it just says for the use of streets, and we need a bylaw to approve the, okay.
Just through this.
I have no problem with the encroachment.
The bylaw first encroachments are extending on Maryville over municipal lands.
Okay,
It's not just about the street.
Councilor Gill?
In the letter that we get from Greg Ritchie, he asks that the annual fee be paid. And, says that the supportive housing project with extremely tight operating margins constrained by DC housing lending. He said, you know, staff had any discussion with respect to what those constraints are.
No, not specifically. We do consider this applicant as a suitable candidate for the encroachment permit. It's a new bylaw that we created exactly for this purpose. So I think there is no provision for waiving the fee in the bylaw. But if council wanted to waive the fee, then they would have to go against our own bylaw.
Councilor Fast, got some comments?
Thank you. I'm glad to see this in front of us. I walked past that building site on my way to council meetings and to the Cove. And I know that this is a charity that's been working hard to get it to this point on behalf of the community, many volunteers over many years. So I support this recommendation. And I'm going to just read it now because I think the fee issue is a separate one. So if you don't mind. Okay.
Yeah, just an intervening.
Happy to.
Just an intervening question. Since publication and then based on this bylaw, my understanding is that this might be an under planning development question, might be a staff question, but the encroachment bylaw authorizes staff to issue these types of permits. And I don't necessarily know whether it has to come up to the council level, so I'm curious why it's in front of us now, or we can just refer it back to staff to make the disposition on it, as it appears to be a delegated authority in the bylaw.
To enter into an easement and encroachment, a legal agreement, which requires council direction.
That's not how I read the bylaw though. So in the bylaw amendment, the encroachment permit, number 42 states the director of engineering may issue an encroachment permit as outlined in Schedule B to allow those things otherwise prohibited by section 38 of this bylaw and subject to such other conditions in section 3. So my understanding is that when we approved the bylaw for encroachments, that we were delegating authority to staff to issue them without having to come to out of the council level. So I'm curious if there's.
To the chair, so in the encroachment policy, it talks about when it requires issuance of a building permit, municipality will prepare the easement and covenant. And the covenant will be executed by the applicant and registered on title. And we haven't delegated authority for the approval of the covenant, so that specific part of it is why we're before council is for beyond the encroachment permit itself is for the registration of easement agreement.
Okay, so is there? So I'm confused on whether this recommendation covers what's needed then if we're talking about an amendment to covenant versus just the issuance of an encroachment permit that's consistent with the traffic and use of streets bylaw. I mean, I'm happy to approve it, but I'm just thinking for future encroachment permits, given that the traffic and use of streets bylaw covers the ability for staff just to issue these permits without it coming up to council, whether that's going to be the future direction or whether we're going to be looking individually at each and every encroachment permit that comes to us based on the bylaw that's being referred to in this recommendation. If that makes sense.
you read section 38. If what they're applying for isn't listed in section 38.
Yeah, I can look at it. I mean, it was just a question to staff about future encroachment permits and how this one fits in. As this is our first one since adopting the bylaw. So it's a question for staff, not to other.
Yes, I can take that on, Mr. Mayor. I certainly wouldn't want to bring every single small encroachment to council. I think there's much more important matters that can be used at this table. My understanding is that there was some linkage to a covenant in this being an affordable housing project that maybe elevated the need for this. If it didn't need to come here, then that's something that staff would overlooked. But certainly would not want to have to bring the matter of somebody's garden bed standing into the right of way to council. Those are engineering decisions, operation. Certainly for the purview of staff, unless there's something major involved.
Okay, that's helpful. Yes, Councilor Pass.
I see in the text it talks about because the proposed anchors will remain in place permanently, staff recommend establishing an easement and covenant to address long-term liability concerns. And that's sort of where I was coming from when I looked at this. And if I move this motion, I think I will add the words after encroachment permit and associated covenant at 1082 Miller Road, because I think that's a good point. And I'm seeing nodding from staff, so.
Okay, so an amendment to add.
And nobody's made the motion yet, so I can just read it in?
Yeah.
Okay, I move that council authorize an encroachment permit and associated covenant at 1082 Miller Road, with the property owner providing an annual fee in accordance with the traffic and use of streets bylaw number 629, 2023 encroachment. And if I can speak to my motion.
Let's get a seconded first and then. Seconded by Councilor Jurgensen, and then motivating on the motion back to Councilor Pass.
Sure, thank you. I just, I want that, I'm interested in any discussion about the fee, but I think an annual fee is a good way. 20 years down the road, people who are involved in the seniors housing who may not be around now, will see annually that there's a fee because there is this encroachment on municipal land, and keeps it in everybody's minds 20 years from now, 50 years from now. And because I think particularly in a seniors project like this, a seniors housing project, there's turnover, and some of the details may not be remembered, and this will just be an annual reminder of the linkage.
Thank you, Councilor Pass. Any further discussion on the motion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. Oh, Councilor Jurgensen.
Just a question through the chair. Is there not already a covenant on this property that would just need to be amended, or is this a new covenant that would need to be struck?
There is a covenant already in place for the septic system that's benefiting. The easement and covenant that's included right now is in draft form. It has not been legally reviewed. So we needed the council direction before moving forward with legal reviews. So we'll move forward now.
Understood, but that would be a separate covenant registered on title, is that correct?
Depending on what the legal recommendation of our council is.
Councilor Morse.
The words easement or covenant are being used, so should we put in easement/covenant in the motion?
I believe it is an easement and a covenant.
So it could be both.
I believe it's both.
So easement and or easement/covenant should be in the motion. So we're authorizing both.
Okay, so an amendment from Councilor Morse then to add the language to the motion.
Easement/covenant, if that makes sense.
Is there any objection to that amendment? Seth?
The same.
Okay. So we will say that that is amended by unanimous consent. We're back up to the main motion. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you, our public works coordinator for being here today. Moving on to new business, 11.1, update the council on items trust business. Over to our trustees, trustee Eddie and trustee Fast.
We've got a council meeting coming up next week. 3 days on Gabriella and the new policies.
New trust policy
Trust
statement.
policy statement has been published. It's on the website. It's very-
It's a draft public statement, policy statement.
We need to boost it in terms of getting feedback from people. So I don't want, I think it'd be easy for the people that are opposed to the trust to put in a whole lot of comments, and I'd really like to get some positive feedback on it. Not that I'm, setting it all up in terms of suggesting that that's the only thing, but I think there needs to be some balance, so I'm pushing it in terms of, I think this community has much to add.
I'm waiting to respond until we have the thing on Wednesday night.
Well, that's the open house for it, but there's a survey that's on the website.
Yeah, but I wanna steer the open house before I fill in the survey.
The other thing that has been attached to this is the iced tea recommendations from for co-governance. And it's providing some really interesting guidelines in terms of it has been published by or written by with the help of First Nations consultant by a First Nation. And it's working with and setting up policies to interact with First Nations in terms of trying to get towards a situation of co-governance. So it's, I think it's well written, it's well researched, it's really an interesting read, and I think that it is futuristic and quite helpful. So I would, one of my, when I sent this to council, I asked that it be referred to the OCP committee, and I would still like for that somehow to happen formally.
So, I would just like to report that, as chair of the Islands Trust Finance and Planning Committee, we met a couple of weeks ago. Thank you, Judy, for coming as well. It was all on Zoom. And so that's getting the budget process underway with earlier input from the public. But if my fellow trustees are okay with this, I'd like to move that council refer both the draft trust policy statement and the ICT co-governance report to the OCP steering committee for their information.
So that's moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion on that referral for information? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Aye, that carries unanimously. That's a great idea. Thank you for that motion.
That's it.
So we'll report back after the meeting.
Okay. So that brings us past our correspondence that we've already dealt with. New business to question period. Any members of the public or online that wish to ask a question of council? Or throngs that are left in the gallery.
Wore them down.
Not seeing any, so we are on adjournment. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Ferguson.